All right, a very good morning to you and welcome along to Friday's OTB AM. An absolutely packed show for you this morning. A star lineup for you, including star himself, Kieran Donaghy from Croke Park during the week. AP McCoy, we've Sonya Sullivan, Conor Sketches is going to join us. We'll have Paul Flynn, who's the Dublin footballer and the chief exec of the GPA, along to chat about his column in the Irish Times yesterday. Quinlan is going to join us to talk a little bit of rugby. Johnny Sexton is here as well. So a cast full of legends this morning, as well as these two chumps. Morning to you, lads.
Good morning.
Dave McIntyre, welcome to the Friday AM studio.
Delighted to be here. It's rare that I get a Friday foray into this AM show.
We're delighted to have you.
I was expecting a crappy quiz-esque sort of punchline there, Adrian, as well as these two chumps, bicep 1 and bicep 2, but it didn't actually happen. I thought you were going to refer to me.
Let's leave that bullshit to the crappy quiz.
Eoin, how are you?
Very well. Still a bit sore after Tuesday. Dave was off air before we came on, kind of patronising us by saying, you guys just haven't used those muscles for years, and that's why you're still stiff after playing a game of football.
I feel like crap. We were playing it, for people who aren't aware, we were playing at Croke Park during the week at the Alan Kearns Self-Help Africa Croke Park Challenge, and there was a lot of players out there who could play, it turns out, Dave, but myself and Eoin were amongst those. To be fair, I'm going to include you in this, who really couldn't. I'm sort of spent our time chasing the ball. I've got a sore hamstring, tight Achilles, I've a pain in my chest, and I'm not sure if it's a heart attack or so just some sort of muscular thing. Pain in my back. I'm fairly sure I've broken a bone on my right wrist. But other than that, I'm grand.
Genuinely, how long had it been since you'd run more than 8 metres prior to the game at Croke Park?
15 years maybe, something like that.
Oh, jeez. Have you seen the video of Adrian running around Croke Park, Dave?
Sorry, I wasn't expecting that. I was expecting double digits, but not 15.
I mean, I'm exaggerating, but it's...
By what, about 18 months?
No, I would have played GAA maybe about 15 years ago, but yeah, not... I mean, I've run since then, obviously, but... And I had sort of actually, the thing that sort of pissed me off most was that I've started to do physio over the last couple of months and have been doing a lot of stretching to the point that I consider myself to be quite limber, actually. But no, as it turns out, there's nothing going on, Dave. That's the short story.
Sorry, what did you ask me?
Have you seen the video of Adrian chasing his men around Croke Park?
No, I haven't. I've just seen a couple of stills. I thought you looked, you look reasonably svelte and fit in your jersey.
Well, thank you
all
very
right, here
much.
he is, marking space.
Oh, but like, the pitch is massive now, to be fair.
Huge, yeah.
Oh, it's a big pitch at Croke Park, all right.
Like, what else am I going to do here? This, like...
It's true.
I know, you know, so I have a bit of a lash. I got a couple of pucks in, right? Fair enough.
Is that you, 44, Owen, that just ran by?
Yeah, no, that's Kieran Donaghy. I know you can get
no,
the two
I'm
mixed
44. 44 in the green and red, the Mayo shirts. Jesus.
No, Owen was on a...
I was not mistaking you for Kieran Donaghy.
Owen was on the Mayo first team, I was on the seconds.
Oh, there was a team A and team B.
The seconds did go on to win the All-Ireland, Dave, so, you know, that's...
Right.
Cora captained us to the All-Ireland. And we did have Aidan O'Shea, who, to be fair, like, it was kind of the Aidan O'Shea show, the Aidan and Cora show.
Okay.
And the rest of us sort of making up the numbers, but it was good crack.
Were you a roving wing forward, or were you just stationary? Did you have your own little circle?
I was doing a bit of sort of research beforehand to try and find out which position I could occupy that would require the least energy.
So you played in goal?
So a lot of people were saying cornerback, you were saying cornerback. No, I didn't go for goal. I mean, the goal would have been I just have no interest in goal. There's no value in being in goal in a game like that, really.
No.
So I decided on one of the wing forward positions, and then after that, as you could see from the video clip, just sort of chased the ball around for a while, mark space. At one point I thought, I'm not getting my hands on the ball here. Cora is, if I go in near her somewhere, she's gonna lay the ball off, I'll get a bit of nothing.
If there was a player ratings being done by a journalist in the press box, what would he have given you?
I'd say like 10 out of 10 for enthusiasm and 0 out of 10 for impact on the game.
They would have said Adrian Barry, maybe a 6, quietly went about his business, did a lot of unseen work.
Yeah, literally nobody saw it. I tried to take down Rob Heffernan at one point. I thought, listen, like, this lad, you know, he's a walker, he can't run, but even he got away from me. Even the Olympian got away from me, Dave.
Even the world champion.
I couldn't believe it when I saw that.
Anyway, that's it. We'll leave it with the Croke Park chat there for the minute. We've lots of good stuff coming your way, as you can tell, over the next little while. So do get in contact with us. Here's a flavour of what's coming up on the show between now and about 9:15, or thereabouts. I'm going to tell you what's happening in the back pages and pick out some of those stories in just a few minutes' time. As mentioned, Paul Flynn, who's the CEO of the GPA, is going to join us to talk about tiered championships and many other things as well. That's coming your way at about 8:15. Half past news, Darren Cleary. Half past 8. Darren Cleary with the sports news is going to be in studio to tell us all about this morning's live sport. We're going to have some Premier League preview and hear from that panel as well at the Croke Park Challenge during the week with AP McCoy. Some pretty interesting stuff from him. And Rugby with Quinny is coming your way at 9 o'clock. But before all of that, it's time for the papers.
OTB AM.
Thanks to Screwfix.ie, championing the trade with a dedicated call centre.
Yeah, so do get your comments coming into us over the next while. Here's a bit of a flavour of what's happening. Quick run through what's happening at the back pages this morning. This is the Irish Examiner. This story is on a lot of the back pages today. It's GAA, and it's disturbing and dangerous. The quote here from President John Horan, who demands an end to spate of GAA flashpoints. That's the Irish Examiner this morning. In the Irish Independent, very much a similar theme here. Horan admits GAA must get tougher on club violence. We must learn from World Cup mistakes so we don't repeat them in Japan. Newsflash, writes Johnny Sexton here in a nice photograph as well of Cian Lynch and Aaron Gillan, who graduated yesterday, the Limerick All-Ireland champions. That's the Irish Independent. In the Irish Times today, it's rugby all the way here. Sexton urging Leinster to bounce back to form, and intensity of first start against the All Blacks made Sexton vomit. It turns out I'm not the only one who can't deal with high-level sport without having to sort of go through the ringer a little bit, Dave. That is the...
Yeah, and they're in the comparisons with Johnny Sexton, begin and end.
The Times Ireland edition, finally for me, is Schmidt exit would not be the end of the world. Johnny Sexton, who was out before the media clearly with all these quotes yesterday, it's expected that Joe Schmidt will make a decision on his future before the end of the year. Obviously, contract running up to and after the World Cup of next year. More Europa paying for Celtic, and King will lose his Ireland under-21 job.
The Herald Sports section goes with a positive angle on the Republic of Ireland. Reid keeps faith alive. Former Irish international turned coach dismisses doom and gloom over future of football here and remains confident that Ireland's fortunes will improve. There's a photograph of Troy Parrott on the front of the Herald Sports section. Back page of the Irish Daily Mail is stick with us. Sexton urges Schmidt to sign new deal, while Horan breaks his silence over acts of violence. You've also got what a cheek. Ruben hits hat-trick. Chelsea 3, Bate 1, Arsenal also 1-0 winners against Sporting Lisbon last night. On the back page of the Irish Daily Star, it's no more excuses. Jose should expect sack, says Paul Ince. Ruben fires a cheeky treble, and Sexton says we have to get it right. And you've also got those John Horan comments there, slamming the violence in Club GAA as we've seen over the past couple of weeks and months. Back page of the Mirror then is sack close for Jose. Old Trafford legend Ince says Mourinho is out of excuses and the club are now going backwards, while President in plea to GAA thugs, and all's well that ends well for Gunners as they get that 1-0 win in Portugal. Back page of the Sun then, tell us you want a Real job. Madrid gives Spurs boss last chance. So Real Madrid are making a desperate last-ditch bid to land Mauricio Pochettino, despite the fact that Antonio Conte is currently the favourite to replace Julian Lopetegui and frown in the dumps. This is an exclusive by David Woods. It says, Jose Mourinho fears he is not getting the full support of the Manchester United top brass. And John says, hit him hard. That's with regards to the brawls and the Club GAA violence. The back page of the Racing Post.
Have the morning to you over there, I'm sure, is it?
Tell us you want a Real job?
Yeah. No, the one. What was the one at the top of
it? John says, hit him hard.
No, the very top of it.
That is the very top.
Right.
A frown in the dumps?
Yes, that's the one, yeah.
It's
tab of the morning?
It's fine. It's
right.
fine.
Fair enough.
Yeah, maybe. I'll give it to you if you really want that to be tab of the morning. Some mornings, Adrian, we don't have a tab of the morning to you. We only give tab of the morning out on very exceptional circumstances. Villains can steer clear of trouble then is the back of the Racing Post. QPR against Aston Villa tonight at 7:45. And a couple of the UK back pages then. The Guardian this morning is Sporting 0, Arsenal 1, and England's double act. Farrell insists joint captains on same page for a long time. So it's going to be Owen Farrell and Dylan Hartley who hold the England joint captaincy. And the front page of the Daily Telegraph sports section finally, Loftus-Cheek hits a hat-trick. Midfielder grabs chance with stunning European treble as Chelsea bait Borisov 3-1.
Just slipped it in there.
He did, quietly. Right, a few of these stories that have jumped out at us that we want to give you a bit more depth on. We're going to talk about those John Horan comments about violence in the GAA. The top 6 against the rest is the thoughts of Miguel Delaney in the Independent this morning, so those coming your way shortly. Tiger against Phil and the prices that will cost you if you want to buy it on pay-per-view, because you can't go to it. No entrance for the general public for the showdown on November the 23rd. Michael Lowry's delighted with the Twitter storm around the Simon Zebo pointing incident last weekend, and Pochettino to Madrid. So we're going to start off with John Horan, and he was out before the media yesterday, and clearly top of the agenda was discussion about whether the GAA needs to step in and take action when it comes to a lot of the scenes of violence that we've seen from around the grounds over the last few weeks particularly. Some of the quotes that have jumped out at me here, and feel free both of you to jump in wherever you want on this one. Violence has no place in our games, warns President, is the article that I've picked out here from John Fogarty in the Examiner, and the quotes specifically that sort of jumped out for me were from John Horan saying, for the purpose of clarity, incidents that arise at local level are a matter for the organising committee in charge within that county to deal with. He says these issues are small when set against the backdrop of the thousands of games that are played nationwide in the proper manner and spirit. There's nothing in these quotes that I've seen that sort of suggests that the GAA are going to actually step in and understand that this is a serious issue, that despite the fact that the rule book doesn't govern for them to necessarily step in and take action in the general course of things, it doesn't seem to acknowledge that these are exceptional and very serious incidents that maybe the GAA need to do a little bit more than they need to go beyond the rule book a little bit.
Well, I don't know if they can go beyond the rule book. The other debate is that maybe rules need to be changed, and there needs to be a far more obvious and streamlined set of rules and punishments for various crimes within the GAA. So you know exactly what is going to lie in store if you commit a certain offence. That's the problem at the moment. No one really seems to know what the minimum and maximum offences should be. There's too many mitigating factors. There's too many ways to get around the rule book. There's so many loopholes in the GAA's disciplinary system. In my opinion, the hands of the top brass, if you want to call them that, I know they hate us referring to them in those terms, in Croke Park, their hands are tied in a lot of ways. Like, I don't know how many of these types of incidents take place every week, but you would imagine that the vast majority of these all-out melees are actually been brought into the public domain by the use of camera phones at the moment, that this isn't happening, say, 10 times a weekend, and we're only seeing footage of 3 of them.
That doesn't matter though, really.
No, but my point being that there are probably enough incidents to make it an absolute nightmare for the GAA at central level to have to try and deal with them on a case-by-case basis.
It's a national crisis, in my view, Dave. I think the fact that 10 of these incidents aren't happening every week it doesn't matter.
No, but the point I'm making is that
10 incidents in the last 2 or 3 months, which is far too much.
To centralise it, they don't. The GAA do not have the resources at central level to be dealing with each of these cases.
Or maybe they just need to employ somebody separately to do it. Like, I mean, because if the alternative is that we continue to see this violence year after year, that's totally unpalatable. And like, for me, I understand the point about you're making about the rule book and their hands are tied to a degree, but I would like to see stronger language from the top man in the GAA coming out and saying that, you know, at the minute, here's where we're at on it, we can take action, but the rule book needs to be flung at these people. They have no place in our game. The language for me in this is a bit too conciliatory. It needs to be black and white, and it needs to be clear, and it needs to say that if in future we are going to put legislation in place, laws in place.
So what types of laws do you mean?
Stringent laws that, because
like, for example, the penalty that was given to the Dingle official, for example. Yeah. Now, firstly, I thought calls for a lifetime ban for this guy were way off the mark.
Why?
Because if you're going to hand a lifetime ban down to everybody who throws a punch in the GAA, you're going to be
a mentor on a player.
That means, but no, it just means that there's absolutely no scope for a second chance. There's no scope for rehabilitation. There's no scope for guys to change their ways.
But you know what,
Dave? There's no scope for guys to learn their lessons.
We're so far away from a lifetime ban. 8 weeks?
Yeah, but the next point was going to be 8 weeks is an absolute joke. Yeah. But we know that within the rule book there was far more scope for a ban of more than 8 weeks. 8 weeks was the minimum that he could have got.
So
and
on that
lo
basis,
and behold, by a fellow Kerry men on whatever disciplinary board he faced, they turn around and they give him 8 weeks, which was the minimum. So
on that basis,
they basically did what they could get away with.
Why is John Horan not stepping in and saying Kerry only did what they could get away with? They should have given, that was reprehensible behaviour from a mentor on a player.
Because you can understand why the GAA president does not want to be commenting on a specific case such as this.
Well,
because then he'll be asked, well, what about this case and what about that case? People want to comment on every case.
But the difference with this case is that it's happened. It's been heard, whatever sort of judicial process has gone on in the background, he's been given his ban, so it's actually been seen through to the end, which a lot of these cases are still either just there's not going to be any action taken against them, as it seems is the case in some of them, and then other of them are still in play. I think it befits the president to come out and say, I read the quotes today and I certainly had no sense that, oh, that's great, it really seems like the GAA are taking this seriously. No,
there's nothing hard-hitting about John Horan's comments, and you maybe feel that his language could have been a lot stronger. I don't believe he should be commenting on a specific case, so I'm not surprised he didn't go into the detail on what we saw in Dingle, or indeed Up and Down, or any of the other incidents we've seen, and there have been so many of them. I mean, we must be approaching 10 at this stage over the last 3 or 4 months alone. But a more general comment on it might have been, you might have expected that from him. I'm sure he and the people that he works with in Croke Park had sat down and they were quiet for so long, far too long. It did take an awful long time for the GAA to actually come out and say something on this that's been boiling up over the last 12 weeks or so. But I'd say they sat down and they talked amongst themselves about what they would say if or when the microphones were put in front of them. This is the best they came up with. But I don't know if it's possible to centralise this, and that's the issue. For me, the biggest issue is that the punishments are not stringent enough. Now, that guy shouldn't be seen anywhere near a GAA pitch for a year, at the very minimum, in my view. I think a lifetime ban is something that I wouldn't want to see that. Like, we don't know, I don't know this guy personally, we don't know what he's done for the GAA in previous years. For all we know, he spent the last 35, 40 years in the GAA, and he's helped children, and he's brought teams up from under 12s upwards, and he's given 30 hours of his week to the GAA.
There is a line somewhere there. At the same time, there is a line somewhere, right?
But a lifetime ban, I think, would be crazy. But he shouldn't be allowed to be any GAA involvement for 12 months, at the absolute minimum. And I think if you are passionate about the GAA and you're prevented from doing anything GAA related for a year, that would soften your cough. And there's no question that the best way to deal with these situations is to hurt a larger group of people. So one guy getting banned for a year is not going to snuff this out.
Yeah, blanket ban is the way.
It needs to be a blanket club ban. And that's why we saw what happened Up and Down, and we think that is the way to go. Now, should Dingle be thrown out of the championship? Should all of their adult teams be thrown out of the 2019 championships?
Well, they probably should at the start to try and actually do something about this, because, as you say, the ban, the current rules that they're allowed to place down to these sort of incidents are way too soft. Now, the thing is, Kerry GAA know what the rule is. It's Rule 2A. They've seen Davy Fitzgerald get the same rule. They've handed down the same punishment to Stephen Wallace last year. They know that this is an 8-week ban, and within the rules, that's fine. Why would Kerry GAA say to themselves, well, we want to be the outlier here, we want to be the ones who take this upon ourselves? So on your point in centralising it, that's why centralising it is the right decision, because then you're not discriminating against any one county, or one county doesn't feel like they have to step out of line to try and make a big point. I think the quotes this morning show just a growing disconnect, and the disconnect that we all know is there between the top brass and between club GAA. John Horan say it's a problem for the relevant authorities. Of course, we condemn this behaviour, but it's a problem for the relevant authorities. The sooner Central Council, the sooner Croke Park take on board or take control of a lot of this, the better. And this doesn't just go for disciplinary issues. This goes for fixtures, as we're going to be talking to with Paul Flynn in a little while. And that disconnect, the trouble is there. That's why we have a problem.
I think it's harsh when you refer to people like John Horan, or indeed prior to him, Pádraig Duffy, when he was in the Irish Juror position, as guys who have no connection or a complete disconnect with the club game. Like, these guys are club men. They have given their entire adult lives to their clubs. And to just...
That's not what I'm saying.
Well, in some ways it is that when you refer to John Horan or Pádraig Duffy or any of the other guys in the positions of power within Croke Park as being completely disconnected from the club game, I do think that's really unfair, because these guys are not disconnected from the club game on an individual basis. Or maybe as a group, but where the GAA has gone commercially and the way it is so elite now at the top level of intercounty hurling and football, it's inevitable that you're going to have a little bit of a step away from the grassroots, because they have so much to deal with that is disconnected from the club game.
Well, that's my point. I'm not saying that John Horan isn't a club man. I'm not saying that John Horan doesn't care about the club game. I'm saying that as a whole, as a body, as Croke Park, it seems that the issues of the club game aren't high priority. And maybe, as you say there, maybe there's realistic reasons for that. Maybe time constraints, maybe the list of things on their priority list just precludes Club GAA from being a factor. Well, there needs to be something else. There needs to be some sort of centralised body that looks after Club GAA, because clearly the case-by-case basis is just not working. But
it's because the rules, there is no deterrent. That's the problem. I think the GAA...
Who creates that deterrent?
Well, the GAA need to, instead of getting themselves involved centrally on every single major incident, they need to look at the rule book, they need to look at the laws, and they need to look at the penalties, and that's what needs to be changed. So if this guy in Dingle, we keep singling him out because it's more than him that's involved in this sort of messing, if he received an automatic 1-year ban, then we would have looked upon this case and thought, that's the GAA disciplinary system working as it should do. We're appalled at the 8 weeks, because it does not send a signal in any way to anybody out there that might lose their cool on the side of a GAA pitch and go after a player or a fellow mentor or somebody in the crowd.
A point that you touched on earlier on, the reality is that if he'd been given a year or any more than that, he would have gone through all the legal loopholes that exist. We've seen
the appeals process then is something that needs to be looked at.
It's laborious and it's full of holes, and by and large what happens is that people end up getting off.
But GAA dealing with these sort of incidents at a central level would have absolutely no impact on that. That's a cultural thing. It's do whatever you possibly can, and it's probably, in fairness to GAA, it's not just a GAA related thing, it's probably more an extension to the Irish societal psyche as well, that we'll do whatever we possibly can to get ourselves off this charge. It happens in all walks of life.
But the violence though is like, it pains me to say it, but it is patently GAA, it seems, in recent times. Like, name one other sport where you see
I haven't seen it happening, and I played adult soccer for a long time, and I never saw a brawl that involved more than 2 or 3 people. Not once. I played rugby. I was at a lot of rugby matches over the years. I've never seen anything like that outside of interprovincial and international level. To me, it is, unfortunately, I wouldn't go as far as saying GAA specific, but it's certainly heavily weighted towards the GAA. Heavily
weighted, exactly. And my point is that as the president of the organisation, he clearly cares deeply about the organisation. As you say, he cares deeply about Club GAA. Like, I would say it as a personal offence. I'm not sure about you guys, but certainly looking at all the scenes we've seen, particularly in Kerry for myself last week, it was a horrendous thing to watch. It's horrendous to think that the very sporting fibre that you probably love more than anything else is being tarred horrendously with this sort of behaviour. Like, that should be a personal offence to John Horan that this sort of stuff is going on. And my point, Dave, is that those quotes this morning don't seem that the man is personally offended by it. And maybe he like, as you say, there was a conversation. They're like, right, we need to be balanced here. We can't really say too much. We'll work hard behind the scenes, but let's not make any big headlines.
Here's one of the points. If I'm one of those clubs that's involved in those, and I read those quotes, I'm not going, "Woof, there's a train coming down the track here." It's like sort of business as usual.
Yeah, the Dingle situation, apart from that punch that was thrown, there was a lot of handbags. You know, it wasn't as unsavoury as the other incidents that we've seen. Like, you can single out this one individual for punishment. It was a little different from what happened up and down, where there's a number of players jumping into the crowd, for example, and that's why those clubs were thrown out of the championship. You know, I mean, throwing Dingle out of the championship in this case probably would have been unfair, because there was really just a lot of pushing and shoving, a lot of jostling. There was nothing overly violent involved until we saw this one punch. Now, one thing, a step beyond this might be the Gardaí, for example, looking at video footage, and it just takes one member of the public to make a complaint against somebody for the Gardaí to be forced to take a look at something. And if there was another incident similar to this, if charges are brought, because if that guy had done what he did, I know this old cliche, if he'd done that on the street, he's facing jail time. So you have to think maybe somewhere down the line that maybe outside forces need to get involved in this kind of thing. That's actually the point that John
Horan himself is making. Violence is violence. I think is the
exactly
separating themselves from the issue again.
Yeah, just because you're inside the 4 white lines, and it means that you can get away with something that you wouldn't get away with in the civilised world. It doesn't really stack up for me.
A couple of quick comments before we go on to the next story. Mike Toomey on Twitter says that on Owen's point about it being a national crisis, that it's an ongoing crisis for 10 or 20 years. On YouTube, Paul Mack says, time to act now. The next punch could be someone falling and taking a fatal injury.
Exactly.
Dave B says, finally on this one for the minute, GAA clubs need to address the violence. Parents will move children to rugby and other sports with more respect.
How can the GAA club address the violence on their own?
More respect to other players and the ref.
How is a GAA club going to act in this? If you leave the responsibility with the GAA clubs, what's Dingle going to do? No. Like, nothing. Like, a county board is not even going to sort this out, as we've seen. Like, why would Kerry want to scupper Dingle's job?
I don't want to have misrepresented. I read out what he sent in, but the gist of it, I think, is what he's saying is that the GAA need to address it. His point being that if it's not addressed, I'm not suggesting that he's got a path to how this works. I think what he's saying is that if it isn't addressed, kids will just move on to other sports. I think that's his point.
It's the last thing I'll say. I just think it's of vital importance that this is centralised. And I know you kind of disagree with elements of that. It is of vital importance that it's centralised, because on a case-by-case basis, counties looking after their own, like, we're all biased towards our own counties. It's what we love. It's where we come from. That is going to blur your lines. It's going to blur what actually needs to be done, because drastic action needs to be taken for this to be changed, because it's a cultural thing. The
difficulty with centralising is the evidence is there to suggest that also doesn't work.
Well, that's true as well, but I think it's certainly a better course of action than the current path we're going down, which is pathetic.
Right. What have we got next on the Miguel Delaney piece? I think we were going to talk about. That was your...
Yeah, it's
piece from the Irish Indo.
A growing gap between the top six in the Premier League and the rest. He says that in total of 120 points that were available this year to the big six, 105 have been claimed. Only 15 have been dropped, and 8 of those have been dropped by Manchester United, who are going through their own problems. Basically, we had the big four. We thought that was going to move away from the rest of the Premier League. That didn't necessarily happen when we've now got a big six, but this is even more instilled in concrete than the big four was. And we talk about a disconnect. You can talk about 6 and 14 in the Premier League for sure, that it's 6 in the rest, and it's as wide a gap as there's ever been.
Yeah.
That's something I tend to agree with.
I kind of, like, I actually think a big six is great. Like, a big six is better than a big four. Like, a big 10 would be better than a big 6. Do you know what I mean? Like, actually 6 teams being competitive.
How far are you going to take this?
I'm just saying that I think that actually, I would sort of argue the opposite, that I think a big six is a pretty good state of affairs for any league. When you look at some of the leagues around Europe who are crying out for that number of competitive teams. I actually look back on some of I just took a random sample earlier on the basis of that piece and just looked back at some of the tables from randomly from years back. So in 96, United, Newcastle, Liverpool top of the league, and then an 8-point gap to 4th. So that was a big 3 to all intents and purposes at that point. 97, United won by 7 points. So, 16 points between them and Chelsea. After that, 98, 1 point between Arsenal and United at the top, and then 12 points back to Liverpool in 3rd, and 20 points between 1st and 6th. So, I think actually we're not in a bad. I think we're in a good place.
Well, I'm as enthused 9 games into a Premier League season now as I have been probably at any time. Looking at the table, what is it? 2 points separating the top 5. Which is an incredible state for the Premier League table to be in, almost a quarter of the way into the season. I personally do think it's great. We had a real disconnect last season whereby the drop-off between 7th and the rest of the table was absolutely huge, where I think 8th place in the table was closer to the bottom team than it was the top team. So that this is not specific or individual to this particular season, but we have had too many since Leicester won the title. We've had 3 campaigns in a row now that have just not captured the imagination in any way. Last two, Chelsea and Manchester City. Now that was based primarily on both clubs going on a run between November and February where they were winning double-digit games in a row, and that for that reason the league title was done by mid-December, early January. I think it could change this year, although there are signs that Manchester City are just clicking into gear now and may go on one of those runs where they pick up 30 out of 34 or 35 points. So overall, I'm not worried by this. If you look at, it's actually continentally wide at the moment. Look at Germany. Suddenly we've got a title race in Germany. The situation in Spain where Real Madrid, Barcelona, everyone's dropping points. This time last year, Barca were running away, Bayern were running away with it. So things are changing for now. It could be just temporary though. We've
a few more stories to get to. We're going to double back to them in a little bit later on, but we are going to talk to Paul Flynn, who's the CEO of the GPA, in just a couple of moments' time. It's coming up at 8:15 on this Friday morning. Delighted to have you along with us, and lots of comments coming in, as you've heard, on the GAA violence there, and plenty more besides, so keep those coming in to us over the next hour and a little bit. Right now, yesterday we were at the offices of PwC in Dublin to celebrate PwC's ongoing support of Gaelic Games. The PwC All-Star Awards are going to take place next week at the Convention Centre, of course, and we're also celebrating the all-new PwC All-Stars app, which you can download right now from your app store. Mark O'Shea was in conversation last night with Shane Stapleton at that show. He isn't convinced that this Kerry team are going to be ready to challenge Dublin next year.
So there's a huge, I suppose, challenge ahead of Peter Keane. To be honest, I don't see Kerry winning an All-Ireland next year. That's not trying to be cute or anything. It's just I see, the level of physicality that Dublin have. The only team I've seen to match that physicality the last few years has been Mayo. And if there's any, I suppose, template of how to try and beat Dublin, it's what Mayo kind of put in front of them, 0-16, 0-17. And I'm talking about players with that the likes of Lee Keegan, Aidan O'Shea, Killian O'Connor, big physical men. So we've heard there Eoin talking about strength and conditioning coaches and all of that. All these people will have a huge role to play for Kerry if they are to challenge. I think they will challenge. I don't think it's going to be 2019 though.
I mean, I know Eoin would strongly differ on that.
No, we literally had this conversation 2 weeks ago.
Right, Kerry are back is the short story, and going to win Sam in 2019. That's what you're saying. That's what I'm hearing. 8:15 on this Friday morning, and it is with GAA. We continue because Paul Flynn, who's the CEO of the GPA, wrote a piece in the Irish Times yesterday revealing that 60% of the GPA membership support a tiered championship structure. And Paul, we wanted to get your thoughts on that. So thanks a million for taking our call this morning.
No problem, lads. How are things?
All is good. And there's some interesting stuff from John Horan in the papers this morning as well. I don't know if you've had a chance to see it. We might come to that in a little bit, but we did want to talk to you about the figures, and that's the reason we have you on. Obviously, a percentage figure can be misleading, so I was just looking to see if we could get some detail on that. Like, you assume maybe 100% of the top counties are in favour of it. Is there any detail on what that tiered structure would mean, firstly, and secondly, what percentage of players from the weaker counties are behind it?
Yeah, I know, and you can take surveys, you can take them in isolation, but we followed up with a focus group as well with kind of some of the key individuals that are responsible for it. But when you look at the survey as is, and just kind of segment out, say the lower tier teams or Division 3 and Division 4 teams, 60% of those have highlighted that they're not satisfied with the current structures. So, as the kind of article suggested, that the hurling championship, it was a great success this year, and the players are happy with the structures and the number of games that they're getting to play throughout the season. But it is with the lower tier football teams in Division 3 and Division 4 that there is the dissatisfaction with the number of games in particular they're getting to play against teams of similar quality, but also the number of games they're getting to play overall. And even when we had the focus group set up, it was interesting that, this is a very difficult, there's so many different people's opinions on this. So we're trying to get as close to objective, feedback from our members as possible. But even at that, in the focus group, everyone wasn't agreed on a proposal going forward, but they were agreed that they wanted to have input on it. When the GAA are coming with a proposal, that they'd love to be involved. So that focus group now is active, and they're happy to put their hand up and to give whatever guidance and support that is required to be able to come up with a structure that is suitable for all. So,
what sort of a response level do you get to these things, Paul? Is it is it mandatory that all counties give in some sort of response, or can there end up being a bit of a gap in some of those teams?
Yeah, it's a good point. And sometimes you can do surveys and you can get a low response rate, but for this one in particular, we just shy of 600 respondents, with a minimum of 3 per team across all teams, 67 teams, up as far as 12 and 13 with regards to some squads. So, and that's a good response rate for ourselves, over 2,300 members. So it is a good representation, and it makes the findings reliable, as well as valid. So it just shows that there is, it's an area where people want to have their voice heard. Some surveys we might not get the same response rate, and that's why we felt it was very appropriate for us to come out with the findings.
Paul, it's Dave here. I was actually surprised by the number of 53% of footballers feeling that the competition format allowed for a sufficient number of games against teams of equal standard. I'm curious as to what teams would actually feel that way, because there are so many one-sided games. The top teams outside of the National League don't really get to play each other until the All-Ireland quarter-finals. I know that's changed with the round-robin series, but anyone outside of the teams that make the Super 8s, they simply do not get to play any games, bar the odd maybe Leinster Championship match of the opening round of fixtures against team of their standard. 53% just seems quite low for me, and I know you say, and the GPA are saying, that things have moved on from the last time a similar survey was done, but I would have thought that would have been much closer to 60 or 70%. What are your thoughts on 53%?
Yeah, it's a good point. And like, again, you're just dealing. There's so many opinions out there, and even yesterday I heard Eoin speaking with Jer about it, about what would the proposed structure look like, and they couldn't agree. So this is this is down to people's consensus. Ultimately, this is just the findings from our members, and that's what they've highlighted. Whether I'm not here to say, I think it should be higher or it should be lower. The figures are the figures, and that's why we are here to kind of highlight that there is an appetite for change. There's definitely some dissatisfaction amongst our members, and the most dissatisfied group is the Division 3 and Division 4 squads when we segment the information. So I suppose that's kind of, it's telling in itself, but it's time now to kind of really have a look at it in more detail.
Yeah, like one of those proposals that we were chatting about yesterday was that Wicklow proposal, which the Irish Independent carried last week, that they want to propose a tier championship, which would see counties compete in their own provinces and then drop into a second tier championship if they don't reach their own provincial final, should they be in Division 3 or 4. Like, is there a sense that the 60% it will be a higher number than, say, 10, 15 years ago, that even when we have gone into previous tiered championships which haven't worked, which have failed quite spectacularly, I would say, is there kind of a full sea change in perception of how these things would go now in the future?
A sea change, I'm not too sure on, but there is a definite, shift in the players' views. And as I highlighted a number of years back, they boycotted a second tier championship of any kind. But I think it is about having input into it on, and I think that's the crucially important part of it. If players feel that they had their say before the proposal was presented to them, they are crying out for more games. They want the games to have coverage and also to be incentivised. And if there's a structure like the Wicklow structure, it gives them the opportunity to enter into the front door. But then also there's another championship afterwards. Or if it was one where it was two different competitions, there has to be an opportunity for promotion. So I think there's so many kind of different angles you can look at this. All we're saying is that, when they are looking at those angles, that they have player input in it.
Paul, I was picking up, rightly or wrongly, a sense of sort of frustration from you in the piece yesterday. I know that you'd been into the CCC maybe last week to present your proposals around some of those tiered changes, and I know you're very keen on, obviously, player-centred involvement and all of this. Have you any indication post that presentation that the GAA are going to engage any more with you on the mandate, as you put it in the piece?
Yeah, and in fairness, when we went in and we presented the findings to the CCCC, they were happy with the findings. With regards to the fact that it was, again, I go back to it, it was the players' opinion. It wasn't just our opinion coming in and saying this is what we feel. And they respected that. It was only 2 weeks ago, and I'm sure they're going to meet up in the next couple of weeks. But we are continuously speaking with GAA to highlight what we propose for the next steps around, a task force being set up around using the lads, the voice of the members. And as I said, there's the focus group there. We're continually speaking to them around this, and the GAA have the opportunity to utilise that as well. But not only around the tiered championship, I think there's some bigger issues as well around April and the close season that need to be addressed, and I think they can be addressed even quicker than some of the other issues. So they're some of the key findings that we found, and we want to kind of have, as I said, the players' input into the changes that are going to happen.
Just on that April club month, because you made a very good point that we often kind of overlooked over the last couple of weeks, that from a student perspective, it's a terrible time to have to train with your club, train with your county, and of course have your assignments and preparations for exams in that month as well. And you point out as well the huge numbers of people who just didn't have an off season going into this year. And Eoin Cormacan was writing in the Irish Examiner last week. He had surveyed all the county boards around Ireland, and a lot more counties this year are actually playing their county finals a lot later in the year, despite the fact that we've had early county finals. What would you suggest interest will be the fix to this, to actually finally getting county boards up and running in terms of moving those county finals forward, because the earlier All-Ireland finals on a county level and the club month of April just hasn't done it this year.
I know, and so we have had 50 of our, as highlighted, like 50 of the squads who highlighted that they didn't have a club only April. Now the only thing I will say about it is in Dublin we did, and I went back for the whole month of April, played exclusively with the club. The club lads actually didn't realise, they were like, "What's going on here? You've been here for the whole month with no break in it." But however, we didn't have a game until 3 months into May. 3 weeks into May. Okay, so that gave us enough time to prepare for a game. Some of the teams had a game 1 week and 2 weeks into May, which doesn't give enough time to prepare. So I suppose it's not just about April in isolation. It's about the weeks after April into May. That will have a big bearing on how in their county teams will release their players or not. And as highlighted in the report as well around our students, like yourself, like the demands that are placed not just on assignments but continuous assessment exams as well, and travelling up and down to back to your club and county within that month just makes the demands unsustainable. So that's why it's important to highlight, like, on top of that, a small reference towards ongoing chronic injuries that are related to not having enough rest and recovery. And we've the GPA have a kind of group set up called a Player Safety and Welfare Group. It's chaired by Dr. Jim O'Donovan, and some of the findings coming out of that are very striking. Like 1 in 3 of our members have had significant hip or groin injuries over the past number of years, and over 200 of them had to have surgical interventions. And I'm one of those players. Like I had a groin operation. There's a number of lads on that I know have groin operations, and they're down to chronic injuries and not having enough time to rest and recover. And with no off season and with a congested April, that only compounds that.
Paul, we did mention that we hadn't planned to speak to you about it, and it wasn't the basis that you came on, but it'd be remiss of us not to ask you about the John Horan comments in some of the papers this morning. I don't know if you've seen them, but he's had his say, I suppose, on the general violence that we've seen around some of the club games, particularly obviously over the last few weeks. And there was some of the quotes that jumped out for us that were specifically about the local organising committees taking charge within each county to dish out any disciplinary action that should arise out of those, and that it's only a small number of games. We've just been discussing how for us they probably haven't gone far enough in how strong they are. I don't know if you've seen them or what your reaction to them is.
Apologies, lads. I didn't get an opportunity to see the papers this morning. However, I have seen obviously a number of the incidents that have been going on, and I think a lot of them they're being caught on camera a lot more now, and going viral. But I suppose this is a GAA related issue as opposed to a GPA related issue. However, I think it's our responsibility to promote respect and fair play in the games, and maybe it's something that we can kind of continue to promote amongst our members, and hopefully then that'll, as role models for our game, that'll have an impact then feeding down into the club scene.
Yeah, is there a role for the GPA to play in it, Paul? Because it feels almost at the minute like as if, and I do appreciate that it isn't there's no onus on you, obviously, and the organisation to step in and do anything about it necessarily, but it does feel a little bit at the minute as if it's a kind of a runaway train and nobody's saying stop here.
Yeah, I know, and as I was saying, like around the role models piece is important. And take our members, 2,300 of them, and within their club, within their village, they're all individually, they're all role models for the game, and they're advocates of the game. And it's important that we continue to be promoting respect, fair play within our games. But I do think that there has to be, sanctions put in place that will, make incidents like this be punished accordingly, and which hopefully then that'll help have a stop point on it as well.
Yeah, definitely. I'm not sure about from a first perspective. Certainly in the last couple of months from the club games, Dublin hasn't really been a factor here. So maybe you haven't seen it up close and personal. But even from your county days, one of the issues that really gets to me, Paul, is just the constant baiting of opponents, the goading, and the little sparks that kind of get lit that start these brawls. It certainly happened from viewing it firsthand. That's what happened to start the Kerry brawl last Sunday. Now, I'm not excusing some of the violence that happened afterwards, but it was ultimately what started a little bit of niggle. From your own perspective, how annoying is that? I'm sure you've seen it up close and personal, your teammates, yourself perhaps hearing that verbals, or perhaps some of your teammates giving out those verbals, like kind of that culture change that perhaps is required to actually nip this in the bud.
Yeah, and I suppose in the inter-county game, you've got officials, you've got on the sidelines and umpires that, they play their part in the club scene. You may only have one man and in the middle of a pitch with 30 players and then another maybe 30 on the sidelines. It can be, hard to control. But I do feel that if it comes down to rules and implementing them, and if we are strict on, all the little niggles that you're highlighting on, and just kind of punish them, it will be a culture change then. Like if you look at sports like rugby, where discipline is quite good, but it's because of referees demand control of the games, and I think that if we can get to that stage, it'll only be good for both inter-county game but also the club.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think some of the criticism, like I've been particularly harsh this morning on like Gaelic games, clubs and things like that, but ultimately GAA people aren't more violent than rugby people, or they aren't more violent than soccer people. That would be a ridiculous thing to say. What it is that there is just less of a culture of respect to your opponent on the pitch. Is that fair to say, Paul?
Is it fair? I think that everybody does respect, the opponents. However, I just think, and it can sometimes get heated. And as I said, like if there's one man in the middle of a pitch and there's 30 players, it's happened for as long as I remember. I think that it's coming to light now. Like, I remember playing underage football, and there'd be a number of melees of sorts like this, so it's not something that's just happened overnight. That's not saying that it's right. I'm just saying that it has happened for years, for as long as I can remember, either going to games or playing our games. It has happened, but that doesn't say it's right. It does need to stop. But again, it's probably more down to the GAA, and I'm sure they're in control of it.
Paul, good to chat to you. Thanks a million for taking the call this morning.
Thanks, lads. Have a good day.
Thanks a lot. Paul Flynn there, CEO of the GPA, and his reaction to the piece yesterday, obviously his own piece about the tier championship and the support that appears to exist for it among some of the weaker counties, because that was definitely a surprise to me, that a lot of the players we'd have had in here in studio over the last couple of years, and because you hear this, it's not the first time we've sort of heard there might be a bit of a sway in this direction, and then when we speak to those players, they all say, there was one I can't remember his name, and I won't name him anyway, from Westmeath at some point during the year, and it was the exact same question. Well, you'd be a typical county that should be in a Tier B competition. No interest.
Yeah, I don't think the players who are currently playing, unfortunately, this might seem a bit harsh, are the people that should be asked about this.
Agreed, yeah.
Because it's like turkeys voting for Christmas. They are not going to want to be playing Tier 2 next season, for example. If you're 27, 28 years of age, for example, and you've got maybe 2-3 years of your best fitness levels available to you in your football career, you probably don't want things to change. I think it's players who are playing minor now, for example, or maybe coming up towards the under 20 grade. They know that when they break into the inter-county team in 2 years' time, 3 years' time, that they're going to be playing their football in a Tier 2 championship, or at the very least a portion of their championship season will be in a Tier 2 second tier championship, that they will get the chance to run with the big dogs at some stage. If the GA puts something in place whereby this is going to be put in place in the year 2025, and that everybody can get ready for it, everyone can get used to the culture that's going to be coming through.
One thing on that, Dave, Seamus Hickey was in, it was a Saturday panel, it might have been 4 or 5 weeks ago, and they were talking about the SRI, and he was talking about the urgency of doing all this stuff, the urgency of, because even that 7 years down the track, most of the players a lot of players who are playing at the minute that'll be spat out of the game, but that, like, careers are being lost to
crap structure
is probably not the worst way to put it. And obviously the burnout issue and the structures issue, the club month issue, like, it's the urgency doing it. And I don't like it, as long as you're saying to teams, what I believe is, as long as you're saying to teams that start out the course, there's no reason you can't say to every team who enters the championship, you this year could win the Sam Maguire trophy if you're good enough. And there's a way to do that and have a tiered championship.
Yeah, there is. Well,
in the same year.
That Wicklow proposal where everybody gets to play in a provincial championship, and if you're in Division 3 or 4 and you make it to a provincial final, well, then you do get a chance to play in the A championship.
And there's no excuse.
Well, I personally like that, but like Ger, for example, is very vocal against that Wicklow proposal. Like his point is that it will fall the same way as other previous Tier 2 championships because it won't have the same coverage. He might be right in that. Like I personally disagree. I think that the idea of putting it on All-Ireland final day, he thinks that people will be milling around the stadium. I think putting it on All-Ireland final day beforehand does add a sense of prestige to it. What I do agree with him is that it's not the perfect fix and that we should always be striving for the perfect fix. And ultimately, the idea of this being based on promotion relegation is down to the national leagues. That if you're in Division 1 or 2, you'll be playing in the top tier, whereas if you're Division 3 or 4, you're going to be in Tier 2 unless you get to your provincial final. So that ultimately makes the national leagues almost more important than your Tier 2 championship. So the thing is to scrap everything and make this all one.
And like also, what lack of coverage are Westmeath and Longford and Waterford?
Couldn't agree more.
Like these counties, what lack of coverage are they missing out on? They're not getting coverage anyway.
Exactly.
They get very little at the moment as it is, but the biggest difficulty with any tiered championship is going to be what happens when Tier 2 breaks away from Tier 1. And you trying to get the mindset of the players right, that this is worth playing, it's worth training for. Like, let's not forget, we keep talking about when this was last attempted, and that we're talking about the Tommy Murphy Cup back in 2008. All of the players who were eligible to compete in the Tommy Murphy Cup started the championship season in the A Championship. And as soon as they got knocked out, they did not want to be involved.
That's a key.
And that is very difficult to avoid happening again. You can promote it as best you can. You can put them out there in All-Ireland semi-final or All-Ireland final day. You can dictate to the broadcasters, radio and television, that a certain number of games from this championship need to be broadcast live on television. You can, bring children for free. You can cut ticket prices. You can do whatever you can. You can talk to the GPA, canvass all the stakeholders as to what they believe could be done. But it's going to be incredibly difficult to get into the minds of these players to put them in a position where they're willing to give the same amount of commitment to the championship in its secondary part as they were in the first portion of it. I'm not sure it's possible.
But also, in a large regard, that problem already exists, Dave. Do you know what I mean? Like the levels of effort or training or preparation or commitment that counties give is already all over the place. Like you've a county like Dublin who are essentially operating to all intents and purposes, a professional outfit, right? I mean that in the non-cynical sense. And then you've like a vast swathe of the counties who just aren't, who are sort of easy come, easy go at inter-county level.
What counties are easy come, easy go?
You can be damn sure that most counties are not putting in the levels of all of those elements that I've mentioned that Dublin are putting in, or Kerry are putting in, or Tyrone are putting in.
In terms of training hours, players probably are.
All of that stuff.
I would dispute that.
Are you telling me that Leitrim footballers are putting in the same hours and have the same
players
level?
Probably are.
You had Emlyn Mulligan in here now and you put that suggestion to him.
I know, but you're talking about Emlyn Mulligan. I mean,
so, why is Emlyn Mulligan giving as much as every Dublin player, but the rest of the Leitrim players are not?
Well, given the standard that he's at, quite possibly.
Not having that at all.
No, the players definitely are putting in the same effort as Dublin. It's obviously above them. It's like the money that they have.
It's down to finances. It's down to people power. It's down to the numbers they have available to them. But in terms of the actual time that they're either spending in the gym, or they're spending on their diet, or they're spending on the training field, I'd be surprised if there was a big difference between the hours an average Dublin footballer is putting in and the average hours of a Leitrim footballer. I would be very surprised.
Except obviously Dublin are going to August and September, but
if anything, the Dublin footballers get to leave work at 5:30, 6 o'clock, and at most they probably have a 45-minute commute to training. It's the Leitrim players who have to make the effort to traverse the country, for example, or spend 2-3 hours in their car before and after training. If anything, they actually have to put an awful lot more into making sure they reach their inter-county commitments than the Dublin footballers.
Shane Finnegan on YouTube says, are these players currently giving the same amount? They know they won't win anything. And other comments coming in there on YouTube and Twitter. So we'll come to those in a little bit.
One more point on what Paul was saying about changing the culture. He pretty much said you can't change the culture of the people in the GAA when it comes to incidents such as GAA violence, that the only way to do it is to hurt them with penalties. And we talk about diving in football, we talk about any sort of cultural shift that we want to make in any sport. The only way to do it is to hurt people and prevent them from doing what they like to do best.
And it might seem extremely harsh at first.
Yeah, but
just like the current high tackle laws in rugby. It seems extremely harsh to the Gloucester head coach last week, but he will soon see in a couple of years, I hope, that this was all worthwhile in the end.
What you need to do is tie the hands of the organising committees in every county behind their backs, so that when you are sitting in front of a guy who you know within the Kerry GA circle or Tyrone GA circle, you can't go to him afterwards and say, you were incredibly harsh on me there, our relationship has broken down, we're not going to do a favour for you in this situation, because the guy who was meting out the punish had absolutely no wriggle room, because he knew what the minimum punishment was. There is no grey area. You walk in front of me and says, I'm sorry, I really don't want to be doing this to you, but you've left us with no position. And like, for example, Danny Cipriani's red card last weekend, the referee said it to him, I'm sorry, but it's high, I have no choice. So if you're the head of a disciplinary body in Kerry and your pal who you know from way back comes in, I've got no choice, but it's a mandatory 6 to 12 month ban. That's just the way it is, and there's no appeal.
All right, OTB AM is brought to you with Screwfix.ie, championing the trade with a choice of over 20,000 quality trade products. Alan Quinlan's on the way at about 9 o'clock or just thereafter. We've a very special panel as well on the way from Croke Park from this game. During the week, we've Tony McCoy, Sonya Sullivan, Kieran Donaghy and Conor Sketches coming your way in just a few minutes' time. But before all of that, Virgin Media Sport, of course, the home of European football, in Ireland with more than 400 UEFA Champions League, Europa League and Nations League games live this season, and Virgin Media Sport exclusive to all Virgin Media TV customers, who can also download the TV Anywhere app and stream all the action whenever and wherever they like. Here's a clip of last night's conversation about Ruben Loftus-Cheek.
To get your hat-trick ball is a fantastic thing. Didn't get too many of them in my time. Don't know how many you got, Kev, but it is something. None. Okay, well, I got 2. But that's lovely for him. And we said beforehand, step up to it, seize the moment, grab the opportunity. He rode his luck. There was some poor defending in there at times, but I thought he also played well on top of those goals, and real good food of thought.
I think he has the ability to do that, though, Will. He's only scored 4 career goals before tonight, so he's got 3 in 1 match. So he does have the ability to do it. Maybe at Palace we saw glimpses of it last season, the ability that he's got. Something Niall's talks about there. He has the ability to manipulate the ball belt, beat players, but I think he's got to score goals more consistently, and hopefully he can do that now.
And Niall, he's not even been in match day squads at times, so this really is, come on, boss.
Yeah, and it tells you how strong that squad is, but he can do no more than he's done tonight, and that's great for him.
Yeah, 20-9 on this Friday morning. Kevin Caban not scoring. Did he say he'd never score a hat-trick in that? I mean, that's not all that surprising.
Well, no.
I think he scored a hat-trick in that game against the TDs last year for off the ball.
He's probably scored about 10 goals. Darren?
I'm not shocked.
Darren, good morning to you.
Never scored a hat-trick in my life either.
Good.
Never going to. So, that's
You're in good company, it turns out. What have you got for us?
Yeah, starting with the Johnny Sexton story that's knocking around online this morning. He says he wished he took a different approach in how he handled his medical information and how that was shared and disseminated. It comes off the back of Conor Murray's explaining earlier this week why he decided to keep details of his neck injury out of the public domain. Murray has not played since Ireland's 3rd test against Australia in June. Sexton believes Murray made the right call and says if he could go back in time, he would do likewise. The out-half detailed why it is in a player's best interest to guard their medical data, as inaccurate reporting around injuries can have serious insurance implications, as Sexton found out when insurers told him they would not cover him for concussion.
If I had my time back again, I'd do the same, and I can see why, because people take what's said in the media as gospel, and often it isn't the case. So if you take my example with the stigma of concussion being attached to me when I haven't had a lot of them, and suddenly insurance companies don't want to insure you for concussion because you've had loads, but you haven't. So I can see why players don't want their information out there, because it can just lead to problems in the future, and it can be disappointing because things can be twisted, and I think at times it's better to just say nothing, and Conor's decided to go down that route. I know Jamie's done it previously, and to be honest, if I had my time back again, I might have done the same. So I don't know if that's come into Conor's thinking. But again, if maybe that is in his thinking. But that would be, if I had time over again, I would have done something similar. Yeah, absolutely.
In the context of the conversation, Johnny, you have an absolute right not to answer. But was it ever something an insurance company raised with you? Oh, Johnny, we've read about concussion. That's an aspect we're not comfortable, or we'll charge a higher premium. Is it something that you personally have experienced where the message has been lost to a point where it's caused you problems in that aspect of your career?
Yeah, 100%. That's exactly what happened, and you can come out and try and clarify things, and then people will criticise you for trying to clarify it and say that you're only looking after yourself and you're not looking after the generation that's coming after you, and you should be more responsible. I was only trying to tell the truth and still not taken. So look, you can't win, and that's why I think that in some ways Conor's right to hold on to his privacy, because again, it could be something small that they're trying to look after him with, and if he releases it, it'll be blown out of proportion, and so it's probably a clever move by him.
How did you resolve your own issues with your own experiences? What did you do?
I'm still trying to resolve them.
That's pretty interesting, isn't it? Don't say anything because the insurers are listening, essentially, which makes absolute sense.
Yeah, and I think that's, it's a very similar situation probably that Jamie Heaslip found himself in. Conor Murray's situation may be a little different in that he was telling us during the week they just didn't know how long it was going to take. And it's probably the only time I've ever been able to compare myself to Conor Murray, but I've just come through the exact same injury that he has had.
Right.
And you just do not know how long it is going to take.
Or if it's going to heal.
No, you know it will heal. Time will heal.
At one point you were like,
No, when you're in the midst of it, you're thinking to yourself, there's no end to this.
Right.
There's no end to this pain. Like, when am I going to be able to wake up and walk around and not feel pain? But it's just that no one can put a time frame on it. I spoke to like 3 to 4 different specialists, and all of them were unanimous in saying, we don't know how long this is going to take. You're just going to have to give it time. Right. And I'd say Conor Murray was in that exact same situation. So I'm not sure how relevant it was to what Johnny Sexton and what Jamie Heaslip have talked about in the recent past. But Murray just wasn't able, and Munster weren't able to give a time frame on it, so they didn't.
But that's why the message gets lost as well, because I think in a lot of the media interviews Johan van Graan did, he said Conor's asked me not to share his medical information. So that's where it gets lost until Murray comes out and says it wasn't a case of I wanted to keep it private, it was a case of I wasn't quite sure. So the message gets lost at source.
But it's also right that the media start to question that too. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's not acceptable that like a media would sit there and go, oh, well, that's fine.
An informational vacuum will be filled, and unfortunately all you've got to fill it with is probably idle speculation.
Well, a lot of
and some of the rumours I had sent to me, because friends of mine know that I work in the media. What have you heard about Conor Murray? We have heard this, and these were off the
getting
wall
the same texts,
stuff.
Crazy stuff.
I think Conor Murray kind of dealt with during the week, but I wonder if he'd had his time again, would they have just given a little more information? Because at the beginning of this injury situation, if they had said, we've absolutely no fears about the long-term ability of Conor Murray to play again, but right now we just can't put a specific time frame on it. That might have helped fill the vacuum.
Do you know what? The next time it comes up, it'll be easier for the next person, because there's now a couple of templates of players who've post the injury come out and explained why they couldn't say anything. So suddenly it becomes, the rumour mill will be doing less turns, I would think.
Possibly,
because, people actually now begin to understand why keeping stum is actually not a bad thing.
Yeah, and you can understand from the player's perspective why it's in their best interest, because a lot of the time these guys are forming opinions, the insurance companies seemingly, on what's in the media and not what's in the medical documents. Because Sexton makes the point of his own concussion with history. He certainly feels it's overblown, and he doesn't feel he's any more susceptible than anyone else. But if you Google Johnny Sexton concussion, you would get a vast body of work that would make it seem that the guy's concussed every second week, which just isn't the case.
What else have you got for us?
Yeah, the GAA president, John Horan, admits they must crack down on violence witnessed at club games. A Dingle mentor facing an 8-week suspension for punching an East Kerry player in last weekend's county semi-final, it appears. Videos of similar violence on the field involving teams from Tyrone, Derry, Down, Cork and Laois have circulated on social media in recent weeks and months. Horan described the incidents as disturbing and dangerous, and says punishments and suspensions need to be meaningful to have an impact. He's quoted as saying on the GAA website, a lot of work has taken place at inter-county level to improve discipline, but clearly there is work that needs to be done at club level. He added that the GAA may need to address the amount of team officials that are allowed on or near the pitch. He says the issue of crowded sidelines needs to be taken into account as a contributory factor in some of these incidents. He adds as well, the perpetrators of these incidents are not above the law. Well, the Bohemians manager Keith Long has committed his future to the Dublin club by signing a new 3-year contract. Long is already in his 4th year at Dalymount Park. He will retain his backroom staff led by the former Shamrock Rovers manager Trevor Crawley. He's the assistant manager there. Bows will be assured of a top 5 finish tonight if they beat the champions Dundalk on the final evening of the SSE Electricity League Premier Division. Dundalk expected to field a second string side. They've one eye on the FAI Cup final. Elsewhere, Shamrock Rovers go to Sligo Rovers, Cork City host Bray and Waterford meet Limerick.
What's the Bob Marley connection with Bows?
Bob Marley connection with Bows, they've just put him, or a likeness of him, a painting of what was probably a picture of Bob Marley on their jersey. He played Dalymount in 1980. His last European
musically
concert.
No, he wasn't lining out for a while.
Big football fan.
Thanks, Dave. Did
you miss all the Bob Marley jersey?
I saw it all. I just didn't know what it was doing there, but I know now, Darren. So.
You know now, they've got him on the wall. He's a mural there with Keith Long. He's on the jersey, and he went worldwide when they released that jersey.
Did he just accept it? You were like, oh, they decided to pick Bob Marley.
No, that's why I asked the question.
Right. I thought when I saw it, I asked around immediately when I saw it, but So I'm being very pedantic.
No,
here.
you are, but I'd like to do regular Friday.
One man who could probably be on a jersey is Conor Murray. They might put him on the Pats jersey eventually. He'll play his final game for the Saints later. They face Derry City. He's made 250 appearances for the club. He's scored 77 goals. He's won the SSE Electricity League, won FAI Cup as well, the EA Sports Cup, the League Cup twice, and the President's Cup. One of the goals fans will never forget, one of the greatest we've ever seen in the history of League of Ireland, against Bows in March last year.
Similar to Naeem from the halfway line.
Yeah,
that one's better, I think.
Similar in that he's loved the keeper from long range.
Halfway
But
line.
his was sort of just booted into the air, Naeem. Like, he just absolutely hoofed that through the skies, where that was a little more cultured, I think, from Crowley. It was no more than 7 or 8 yards off the ground. It was beautifully arced.
Tasty.
And he sees Shane Supple is off his line as well, so he's definitely going for it. What's more impressive in that clip is he actually manages to get to the end line pretty much as the ball has just hit the net. He's at halfway and he gets
It's like
right
a
to the end
golfer
of the
walking
pitch.
after his approach shot.
Yeah, it's very impressive. And the golf is where we'll actually finish up there, Dave, because Rory McIlroy has just finished a disastrous second round at the WGC HSBC Champions event in Shanghai. The Ultraman lies 5 over par. That leaves him 16 shots behind the leader, Tony Finau. The American has a 4-shot advantage at the moment on 11 under par.
Thanks, Darren. Kieran Byrne on YouTube says violence at GAA matches will always be there. It cannot be prevented. Anyway, it's better than the PC prima donna soccer crowd.
That must be up there with the most nonsensical correspondence we've ever had from a listener search for you.
I think Kieran's tongue is firmly in his cheek there.
I would have thought so. Right, thanks, Darren, for the minute. It's 10 to 9. Alan Quinlan on the way to talk all things rugby, the Ireland squad, Keith Earle's new contract, and plenty more as well. Besides, before all of that, on Tuesday, myself and Eoin, we attempted to take on some GAA stars in the Croke Park Challenge for Self-Help Africa. After the game, we had a very special panel. It was AP McCoy, Sonya Sullivan, Conor Sketches, and Kieran Donaghy. Check it out. AP, what about yourself? Are you? I'm not joking when you were sprightly out there.
I thought I was fit until I went out there. You know what I mean? But I'm 2 stone heavier than I was 3 years ago. Like so, I felt like it was starting to tell after about 10 minutes. So it was. But no, it is a great experience to be able to go out in Croke Park. Not many people from Antrim can ever say they played in Croke Park. So I feel like I'm one of the special ones getting to. I wouldn't say play football, but go out on the Croke Park and pretend or try to play football.
Kieran, when you went out on the pitch for the first time in Croke Park, did you get shocked by the sheer size of it? Because I think a lot of us out there today, probably due to the fact that we're severely unfit, we're like, the size of this place is incredible.
Yeah, I was like that. It was a minor. When I came on, my eyelids started hopping, actually, when my first ever time playing out there, and I was running around, I didn't know what was going on. So when it's packed as well, it makes it even feel bigger, because it's it nearly takes energy out of you. But it's a massive pitch, and when you're trying to tear after fellas nowadays too, with the way the game has gone, it's harder. It was great when I started. You kicked your point, you stood back in full forward, you waited for the next ball to come in, let the other fellas do the battling outside. Whereas now you find yourself doing a lot more running. But I think it's a game now really where everybody has to be kind of nearly as fit as each other, and everybody has to be at. You can't winter well anymore, I'd put it that way.
No.
Today's game obviously was all to do with Self-Help Africa, and for the Alan Kearns Foundation as well. And it was a pretty amazing experience for the rest of us numpties who obviously haven't got the skill or talent to get out here and experience it, and to go through all of that sort of formalities in the dressing room and that beforehand. What's it like when you're down there? Like, we were in the warm-up room beforehand, sort of getting straight into it with the the warm-up routines and all. What sort of a guy are you in the warm-up room before you get out there?
I suppose when you're up here, look, it's serious business when you're here. So it's you're just trying to get your head in the zone, get ready for the war, and make sure that those other fellas are getting ready with you. And if a fella doesn't look sharp or he's not at it, you get after him. And likewise, if a guy is kind of shying back from it, you try and encourage him. Maybe a young guy, a debutant or whatever. So you're just kind of scanning the room, trying to keep yourself calm but get yourself going at the same time. It's an interesting balance to get there, because when you're in that room, you're still 40 minutes away from game time. So you know, you can't have fellas banging their head off a wall inside there because they're going to be no good to you come the game. So it's just striking that balance about getting the right level of intensity and making sure guys are up for the battle.
Were you always like that? Was that something when you came in from the very first off? Were you that guy all the time, or did that take a bit of time to build into?
In fairness, I'd have to say probably early on, you know, when we played Armagh here in 06, was my first time starting for Kerry in a championship game against the mighty Armagh team at the time. So I was very much trying to get my head around Francie Bellew and the Armagh defence more so than look around the room. But I suppose when you get to 2018, you're kind of doing a bit of that. You're watching out for the young fellas more so than yourself. You kind of, I guess you've kind of been through it so often. You know how to get yourself right, and you're probably doing a bit more scanning at the age of 35 compared to 22. Yeah.
Tony, what about yourself? Are you when you're in the weigh room before you went out for a race, what sort of guy were you? I mean, we've all seen the documentary, so we may know the answer to this already, but
I was pretty. I didn't really socialise a lot with anyone when I was in the weigh room during race, and I, especially at some of the bigger meetings, I kind of managed to get myself into the corner and I kind of stayed there. I don't know, for whatever reason, my position in all the weigh rooms ended up being in the car round behind the door, basically, so I didn't have to look at anyone coming in or out. Anyone didn't have to look at me. It probably was something that other people enjoyed, not having to look at me either, so it suited both of us. But yeah, I was pretty quiet in the weigh room, you know what I mean? I was always pretty much in the zone, and you know, so everyone's different. You know, there's a lot of lads that are loud and rowdy and that, but I was always kind of like, I didn't interact with a lot of people. I was okay after racing and all that, but during racing I was.
And would you have to get, like, was there a process to get yourself into that mindset almost, or that something that just, was there a trigger, or?
No, not really. Was there a mindset? Look, it was about, like, sport, as these people know, you know, it's about winning, you know what I mean? And much and all as I was being employed by people to ride their horses, or whether it be an owner or a trainer, I wanted to win for me, to be honest, more than I wanted to win for anyone else. And the biggest problem I had was keeping me happy. You know, whatever about some fella paying me to ride his horse, or an owner or a trainer, they didn't have to live with me, they didn't have to go home with me, you know what I mean? So they only had to endure me for 5 or 10 minutes whether I won or lost on their horse. So it was kind of, you know, I was the poor unfortunate one that had to bother with me all the time.
Do you miss that adrenaline rush?
Look, I miss winning, and miss winning more than anything else. And you know, as Kieran or Sonya will tell you, you're going out in front of a big stage. You know, not every sports person will admit to it, but you have to have an element of ego inside you that wants to perform better than everyone else on the big stage. You want it to be about you. And you know, if you win the Cheltenham Gold Cup when there's 70,000 people there, or the Grand National, the same, you know. But I missed winning, and I missed that. In some ways I missed the danger, and that's a tough thing to say, because I saw colleagues being fatally injured, and I've got images in my head from lads going out and not coming back, you know. And you know, John Thomas McNamara getting a fall in Cheltenham, I'll never ever forget his suit hanging up in the corner, thinking he's never coming back, you know. And that's something that you live with all your life. But in some ways I miss the danger. I miss 25 runner race at Cheltenham and getting kicked all over the place and thinking I got away with that. You know what I mean?
Most people say, like, I had a realisation at some point in my career in terms of jockeys that actually I wasn't going to get away with this forever and I needed to get out. But what you're almost saying is that danger was a thing that almost kept you in there.
Yeah, I got I wouldn't say I got an adrenaline rush from it. I liked living on the edge. You know, I liked the element of thinking that, you know, say in that 25 run race, or you know, I broke my back in 2008 in Warwick, and I was lying on the ground, and I didn't know whether the sweat was running down my head from the pain or the fear of that I wasn't going to be walking. And within 5 minutes of being in an ambulance, and the ambulance drivers and the doctor put you in a spinal board, and you can feel your feet and the whole lot's moving, you're thinking, how long am I going to be off for? And you're having an argument with the doctor, thinking like, you need to make me better quickly. So your whole mind process changes in 5 minutes. You know, you forget the fact that 5 minutes earlier you might not think you're ever going to walk again. So it's kind of like, you know, so. But in some ways I miss that. I miss that adrenaline rush. I miss the routine of it. I miss the discipline of it. I miss getting up in the morning, needing the feeling of having to perform. You You know, that whatever happened yesterday is irrelevant, that I need to be good today. And if I was bad today, I cannot wait till tomorrow. I'm going to be good tomorrow. You know.
Can you resonate with some of that, Sonya?
Yeah, no, I'd be exactly the same with things like that. So, like, if you didn't have a good session, I would go out and try and repeat it the next day and just try and... You just had to be happy with yourself. And if you weren't happy with yourself, then you couldn't rest or relax until you sorted it out and get your head ready to go again.
This won't be news to you, but there's a madness in what you're saying there.
I think actually in elite sport, I think there's a madness in Sonya Sullivan and Kieran Donaghy. They might not admit to it, you know, but there is a madness. You know, there has to be a madness, whether it's Mike Tyson, Zinedine Zidane, you know, whoever it may be, Tiger Woods. I think there's a craziness in them all. You know, I think there has to be that something different, something inside that you can't instill in someone. You know, I think, you know, to be a top elite sports person, there has to be something different. You know, there has to be something that makes you, you know, you're never satisfied. You're never content. You never feel that you're after achieving what you want to achieve. You're always chasing the next thing.
I enjoyed chasing you around Croke Park today and enjoyed chatting to you as well. I know you have to get off to the airport, so thanks a million for coming to chat to us. AP McCoy, everybody. Sonya, Tony's been talking about obviously thanks a million. Cheers for that. Thanks a lot.
Okay. See you.
Safe travels.
Yeah, take care.
Tony's been talking about like missing. Pull in there, lads. Pull in. He's been talking about.
Because we can't hear you.
I know. Yeah.
Up here, right?
Come in close. We'll gather around.
AP, whiten them there before you go.
He talks about missing winning. Do you miss winning?
Not. I suppose you do, but then you kind of wean yourself off it as well because you know that it can't last forever. I think what happens is that you get to a point where you want to do more, and there's things that you don't complete, and then you get to a point and you can't do it anyway. So you have to find a way out.
How do you wean yourself off it? What do you do? What's your outlet?
I think you keep doing the same thing for a good while after, and then what happens is the effort that you're putting in, you don't get the same results back, and then you start to realize that this isn't adding up here. Okay. And so you go from doing things that you think make sense that most people don't, and then you realize that it doesn't make sense to work so hard but you don't get the results back. So then you get at the point where you're putting in much more than you're getting back, so you have to say, okay, well, I have to do something different here now. I have to change this because I'm not going anywhere.
How long were you doing that when you realised that?
I had no idea. You'd rather not think about it too much, you know. I'd say for a good 4 years, you know, because you go from, like in a runner or an Olympic athlete, your career is based on Olympics. Yeah. So you're always looking at the next Olympics, and then when you get to the next one, it's like, well, you either decide you retire or you might go for the next one. And then you get halfway through and you try and push through, and you either make your mind up or you fail to make it to the next one. And when you fail to make it to the next one, then the decision is made for you.
What were you like? We were chatting to the lads obviously about sort of the different kind of characters that they were before they went out to compete, and different dynamics between team and individuals. But what were you like as an individual in the changing area before you went out?
Well, I would always have a similar routine every time. So it was like clockwork, you know. So everything followed a pattern.
Right.
And so when I got to the track, I would go behind the high jump mat and lie down, put your legs up, read something, and you'd always have you'd be on a countdown of your watch the whole time and always counting down to the race. And so, you know, it was like a bit of a, I don't know, you just didn't think about it. It just happened, and you just fell into this pattern of things, and you know, before you know it, you're on the start line. And then and once you started into that routine in the day, then you knew that there was no going back, and it was always getting closer and closer to the race.
Conor, what about yourself? There's a very easy segue into what you're doing now at the minute. I know obviously some of your stuff is obviously recorded, but you obviously do a lot of live performance as well. What are you like this guy before you get out and do a live performance?
Yeah, I think so. Even a lot of people were talking about, I'm obviously following the golf tournaments now and things like that. But I went to a golf tournament about 3 years ago, and it was the best tournament I was ever at. It was only a small one. Now when I go to them, they're these big events, but you're working at them, like, so you're never really... I was actually asking the lads about that, the Dublin lads today. I was saying about Croke Park, do you enjoy it when you come here? And they were kind of saying, you enjoy after the match and when you get the win, but before it, like, you don't really... You're so concentrated on the game. And I suppose I'm kind of like that, especially going to gigs and stuff like that. You're always just... And you don't really... You don't enjoy the moment, I think, enough. But it's still... You know, when the gig goes well for you, please God, anyway, you can enjoy it then, do you know what I mean, and get your few pints into you.
Yeah, not doing too bad, in fairness. More often than not,
We've obviously seen you, you're sketching the Sunday game, your impersonations got to meet the real people in the Sunday game in the summer. Did that ever happen with the golf at all? We obviously saw Sergio and the likes tweeting about you. Did you actually get to meet him first person at any of the tournaments you've been at?
I did. I was at the British Open and I was just walking along the fence. It was on the Wednesday. It was a practice round, and out of nowhere then Justin Rose came up behind me and he did his impression to me, and he was like, you know, a lot of ebbs and flows, peaks and valleys. And I was just standing talking to him for a few minutes. The golfers are all so nice, but Poulter writes to me on Twitter. Poulter reminds me a lot like Joe Brolly. Like, he loves it. Like, he's embraced it. He's like... So he's invited me to do a gig in December in Orlando, and he wants the cameras there and the whole lot. He wants to get a good to get some traction out of it. So he's definitely enjoying it. I don't know. I think Bubba Watson or a few of them. I don't know if they're fans of it. I don't know, but.
Oh really? You think there's a bit of?
I don't know. Someone said that to me, like, but.
I can't believe you're telling me Bubba Watson is not good crack. That is absolute shock horror.
And I wouldn't mind, actually. Rory Stories is here. When I did the Masters video, the video that kind of got it all going for me. Rory said to me on the phone, he said, geez, you got to do Bubba. And I was like, I don't have enough time to do Bubba. And he goes, you don't have to do him, just have him crying. Right. So I ended up, all I did was I cried in the video, and most of the comments were about Bubba Watson. Everyone was like, you nailed Bubba, you nailed Bubba. And there was no impersonation there at all. So I have to thank Rory Stories for that one. His guidance is invaluable.
You've had a busy few days with the county final down in Westmeath. It turns out you retired at just the exact wrong moment.
Same age as Georgie Best. But
is that where the comparison?
Yeah, no, I had to give it up this year. Like, I just didn't, because clubs are giving it, like, you know, 3 evenings a week and then their own stuff and things like that. And my uncle was the manager, my cousin was the captain. Nepotism for you there, you know what I mean? Although he deserved it, in fairness to him. My brother was playing full forward, like, so. Of all the things that happened this year, I was just saying to my older brother there on Sunday, I was like, you'll never maybe get another night like this. It was a town final. We were playing Lomans. They were going for 4 in a row, and to get that win, it was just incredible. And all your best friends are, and that's what makes the GAA so special. Of all the golf gigs and all the soccer gigs I do, the GAA gigs, you definitely get the big kick-off, really, for me anyway. Just from growing up in like a GAA household, like, even, and also like a lot of the GAA players, because I started out doing the GAA. So many of the lads, even himself, like, I didn't meet him now until today, like, but he texted me randomly there a couple of weeks ago, congratulating me. Conor McManus, Paul Flynn, loads of the lads, like, they all, like, kind of have your back, like, it's like you're a GAA fella or something, you know what I mean? Going out into the golf world. I said to himself earlier on, if I can find the golfing version of Ger Loughnane, I'll be a millionaire, so I'm looking forward to that. It'll be hard got, though.
Yeah, listen, I'm sure that NBC contract, you're on the right track, right? That's, you're obviously spending a lot of time in the US at the minute as well.
Yeah.
How's that? How is that? Like, I mean, Mullingar to whereabouts are you mainly based?
Well, at the minute I'm just kind of going over and back, but I'm moving to New York now in about 3 weeks.
Right.
But I have a cousin over there, an uncle over there. My brother, he's an attorney. He's been living there about 7 years. So it was kind of that or Orlando, and Orlando is like, there's nothing really. There's golf courses there, and you're kind of on your own. In New York, it's like a home away from home. There's loads of Mullingar lads, and when you're Irish in New York, like, you think it's a big place, it's not. And I lived there for 2 years, so I'm looking forward to getting back. I'm just working on my Donald Trump and things like that at the minute, and Tiger Woods, you know. Conditions are really tough out there and all that kind of stuff, so that's where I'm at the minute.
Trump, give us a blast of Trump there.
Well, you know, it was a tremendous game out there today, I gotta say, you know. I watched it from the Cusack stand. Michael Cusack is a great friend of mine. You know, it was really great. You know, Micheál Martin, he was the manager, you know. I spoke to Micheál for 20 minutes. I didn't understand a word he said, I gotta be honest with you. It was all blah, 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 blah.
Yes,
but,
excellent stuff.
Micheál's gonna make Fianna Fáil great again, I can tell you.
I know you've got a load of stuff to do for the good people out here later on, so we'll let you go for the minute. Thanks a million. Conor Moore, everybody. Thanks a million, Conor. Cheers for that. I think it'll be Tomás O'Leary in the wings as well. He's going to come up and join us in a minute. Thanks a million, Conor. Cheers for that. He's going to come up and join us now in a minute. Kieran, we were going to have a good chat with you about club football in Kerry.
Yeah, county final next Sunday, it'll be good.
It's more last Sunday I wanted to talk about.
I was at the game. There was unsavoury stuff. It's gone so intense now, the club game. It's kind of, it's like Conor said, they're putting so much into it. It's 3 or 4 nights a week, so tensions are very high. A few decisions go haywire, and you can't condone what's going on. And it's a pity really, because it overshadowed what was a brilliant display by Dingle. Paul Ganey got 3-1. 2 fantastic goals from play, slotted a lovely penalty, and he put on an exhibition of leadership, tackling back, doing all the scoring, but tackling back, knowing what had to be done. Mikey Ganey was very good. Tom Sullivan, who came very good for Kerry this year, was brilliant as well. So next week's going to be very exciting. Crokes and Dingle, loads of good players on the pitches, and it should make for a great game of football, and hopefully that stuff is kind of figured out and we don't have any of it next week.
What do you make of the new appointments in Peter Keane?
Yeah, very exciting. I think it's a very good management team put together. They'll have to be given a bit of time, a young team there, but in Kerry they'll still be expecting to be back in the top table next year. So that'll be Peter's assignment. He won't get any leeway off of the fans or the players, because that's, I was in that dressing room this year. Just because they lost a few of us old fellas, that doesn't mean they're not going to be going for the All-Ireland next year. They'll be a very fresh and hungry group, and I'm really looking forward to supporting them and see how they get on.
Yeah, it feels like you're going to have to keep up the basketball for a few more years, listening to AP and listening to Sonya talking about life after sport and that lack of competitive edge.
Yeah, no, the basketball certainly keeps my competitive edge going, and I'll have a few years to give to the club. So yeah, no, it's people say, oh, what's retirement like? It's I'm busier than ever if I'm being honest, but look, it's exciting. The basketball is a very enjoyable sport to play, and I get a great kick out of it. I'm extremely busy. We're training 3 nights a week with a game at the weekend. I'm my basketball camp next week, so it's non-stop, and you're trying to fit in work and family balance as well. So yeah, pretty busy, thanks be to God.
How long before you start coaching Kerry?
No, I'll be leaving that to Peter Keane's team now, and I'll be watching. I'll be taking a few notes from this.
Like different sport obviously, and like whether it's real modesty or a GAA type of modesty about ambitions or whatever, and I will get involved with Munster or whatever it is. You will at some point. It seems inevitable that you're fascinated by that area, you're interested in tactics, you've been around the game at the highest level. You will at some point get involved at the top level, you would assume.
I'll have to make sure that I'm up to it. It's all well and good people saying.
How do you find that out?
I think you obviously have to do a bit of work.
Club coaching.
Yeah, you have to do a bit of coaching at some level, at some grade. And I'd be interested in looking at other sports, maybe getting in with a rugby team just to see what they're doing. I'll go to America. I'll go looking at maybe college basketball teams. I have a few contacts over there from over here, and I'll do a bit of that and dip my toe in the water at put myself forward or try and go after a Kerry job if I don't feel I'm up for it. So it's a long way to go before that. But obviously, it would be a huge honour to manage Kerry, but it's a high pressure job. I was always a fan, so if you take on the manager's role and you don't deliver, I'd be public enemy number 1 there as well as everywhere else. So it's tricky. It's a tricky one. It's a big pressure job that you don't get paid for, and that your family and yourself have to put up with a lot of stick when results don't go well, because that's the environment we're in these days. If the results don't go well, it seems to be the manager's fault. Even though there's 15 of us running around the pitch that aren't doing the job that we're supposed to do for the manager. So I think a lot more has to go into player culpability and make sure that we're doing our job. I think the manager is always the easy one. It started with the Premiership, I think. Hire him, fire him. If he's not doing the job, get rid of him. It's his fault. Nothing to do with the 25 players that are getting paid millions of pounds to do their job. So yeah, it's a funny one, but it's a job that I'd really have to be comfortable in my own knowledge that I'd be able for it, and that I'd be up for it, and that I wouldn't be letting the county down before I'd ever think about taking it, really.
Yeah, 9:15 on this Friday morning. That was our panel from the Croke Park Challenge during the week. Myself and Eoin were playing, and there we are. Look at that for a couple of athletes, Quinny. What are you thinking? Have you ever seen such fine
great shape,
specimens?
Yeah, great shape.
You're welcome.
Fair play to you anyway. It was good to
just for doing some exercise.
Yeah. How's your fitness these days?
I don't know really. It's a while since the last.
It's always a worry when you don't know.
The game for Axel and the rugby game last year.
And how did you? Were you blown hard?
Blown, but I wouldn't say hard. Not too bad. I do a bit of training now and
Do
again.
you? Yeah? What are you like?
Just a bit of running
gym?
here and there,
Right.
yeah, cycling, stuff like that. Spin
How are the
classes.
joints?
Sore-ish.
Are they? Yeah.
Yeah, but I'm not too bad. I like doing it. But
Are you?
The competitive side is gone at this stage. I'd say, of competing in anything or.
You wouldn't do like sort of fellas of our age are into like triathlon now and all this sort of stuff.
No.
Not happening.
There's an Irish group actually. The lads going to Bermuda next month for the 15s tournament, very famous one in Bermuda. So there's an Irish team going out there. I was asked to go, but I couldn't go, which is a good thing.
Don't mention the war here. But
not a good example.
But you're doing different sports, so you're not sort of. There shouldn't be that repeat thing. I'm thinking here with poor old Dave. Have you got the Irish Independent there on? There's one thing that we wanted to mention at the top of it, Quinny, because you were in with us obviously last week.
On Monday.
And you were giving us the lowdown on Monday about your take on Nigel Owens and Simon Zebo. And then I pick up the paper this morning and I see Alan Quinlan. Why Nigel Owens was right to tell off Simon Zebo.
Yeah, there's a bit of a change in my approach to it. I think initially it's not really necessary, but with respect to Nigel Owens, I think, and look, I did say on Monday he's a fantastic referee and he's a great bloke and stuff, and I just kind of like let him off. It's not a big thing. Just get on with the game. Let them sort it out themselves. But I was wrong because I did my research after that. I know there was a bit of furore about me saying that, and was I right? Was I wrong? I think social media, you look at that, and it's the kind of divided opinion on people's opinions on it, that he was wrong and he shouldn't have done it, and other people saying it's a storm in a teacup. I was kind of leaning that way, and I was kind of saying maybe there was no need to draw attention to it, but I was wrong because I did some research, and World Rugby have given all the referees a directive about gamesmanship, unsporting behaviour, riling up the opposition guys, and keeping to the rugby values of the game. And I think, in fairness, he's been exceptional at that, Nigel Owens, and he speaks a lot about it on the field. His achievements and what he's reffed and the matches he's done speaks for the type of referee he is and how good he is. And I think reflection, it was his business, because I suppose I still feel it's a very small thing, but I think I probably wasn't thinking of the bigger picture and what it can maybe lead on to. In other words, it can escalate possibly another incident. Somebody can go after Zebo after that and there's a lot of good control in that. I was on breakfast this morning talking about, and I make no bones about talking about the respect not just players have for each other, but players for referees, the opposition fans, part of our whole journeys, and integrate with the crowds all over Europe and stuff. And rugby is great for that. There's no violence, there's no abuse. I think you could probably say some of the Munster-Leinster games and the height of the battles and the rivalry, there'd be unsavoury things said here and there, but never an issue over safety or anything like that. So rugby's a great game, and its inclusivity is fantastic.
Do you think we're World Rugby worried about it? Is that why they've given the directive
no,
to referees?
I think one of the things is to keep those rugby values strong and stay ahead of the pack and be a kind of a pace setter in good practice. So in other words, good practice of handshakes, respect for each other, the old rugby ethos of having a beer after the game, going in afterwards, both teams have a meal together. Not every time, because some of the Pro 14, you're in and out, you're on a chartered plane, you're back home on a Friday night, but that old ethos that people mix and they kick the crap out of each other on the rugby field, very physically sometimes, and then everybody comes together and puts it behind them. So I think that kind of those rugby values have always been there. I think even if I go back 20 years ago and I go to club games in my own county in Tipperary between local clubs, I've never seen any sort of kind of you know, there's always been a respect there, even though sometimes matches do get out of hand, and they used to be a lot rougher. But nowadays, I think rugby has set a great trend in sport about discipline, transparency about discipline, and video refs and all that kind of stuff, and punishments handed down. You look at Danny Cipriani; he got 6-week ban for what wasn't an intentional kind of hit on Rory Scannell last week. It was reduced to 3, and then you look at some of the GA stuff where an official runs in off the field and he gets 8 weeks. Rugby sets a good standard with their disciplinary action, and I've been on the receiving end of that a few times, and deservedly so. So I think going back to the bigger picture of looking at the bigger picture, I think he was right, and he's mic'd up so we can all hear it. Obviously, in an ideal world, you'd love that to be a genuinely quiet word, and saying that maybe Simon Ziwa, if he took the lead himself and went over even after scoring the try and got up off the ground. So it kind of got blown out of proportion a bit. And to be fair, Dave, Nigel Owens he's very hot on that. It's not something like he's just said that. He's just decided to do that. He does speak a lot sometimes. Live stuff there. So
I wonder, was it that he had seen it was Lowry who was on the receiving end of it as well, and
that's
that
what I
influence
thought.
Possibly,
as well,
yeah. If it's another big international,
if he had said it to Rory Best.
But if it's Stockdale against,
it's poor little Michael Lowry.
Well, I think because he's so inexperienced and he's not an international. If it's Jacob Stockdale on the other side, he's probably.
No, was he influenced by the player that was on the receive over the try line? Would Nigel Owens have bothered? Perhaps he would have, and it wouldn't have mattered to Nigel who it was. His first European Cup start away from.
Probably not.
I mean, if Simon Zebo was only picking out the 20-year-old because he's so inexperienced and vulnerable, that does not say much for Simon Zebo. I think we're being unfair on Zebo there. I think it was just whoever it was. I was in the moment. I don't think it would matter who it was that it was coming over to try and get closest to him.
Right from the story, it still doesn't. It's still. This is my same opinion. It's a very small thing. That was the whole situation. It doesn't matter. It's not even. The referees have been given this directive. Johnny Lacey gave a penalty at the weekend, cast against Exeter. The cast captain tapped one of Ian Whitten on the head, penalty straight away against him.
Castro are terrible if that. Remember,
came in the side of the ruck, got penalised, and he started tapping. And Zebo tapping a player on the head from.
You were a serial head tapper.
Never.
Really?
Show me any sort of. I'd abuse people and I'd get into verbals, but that's part of the warfare of taking on your opposition, trying to psychologically beat them. Never have I been tapping players.
We're going to have to troll through some footage.
You won't find any footage of it.
Even if it takes hours.
It would infuriate me. Now, you can get plenty of verbals from me, or, but that's not something that... I think it's wrong.
Is that in the spirit? So
we all say things and we all kind of stand toe-to-toe in games, and we look at...
but surely that's not in the spirit of things either. I'm sure
it's not really, but it's confronting you. Things get said in the heat of the moment and stuff like that, or a little bit of language added in, bad language, or
hello, fine sir.
Or
you shall not vest us today.
Like you get verbals, and that's part and parcel, and that's part of the psychological.
I find it hard to say, giving them a little head tap.
Yeah, but you're not running over on you're an effing so-so and you're this, that, and the other thing.
I remember in the Ulster final a couple of years ago, McManus kicked a brilliant score, and as he's walking by Neil McGee, McGee thought you could even see he was grudgingly respectable.
Sometimes there's millions of verbals all day, and then you can kind of go, now who's got the better of you, or whatever. I'm not advocating that you can go out and abuse players. I'm not saying that, but I think in rugby sometimes in the confrontational, people get up off the ground, they kind of shout and they go, you won't beat us today, or you won't break us. Stuff goes on in lineouts, particularly when forwards going against each other, and there's little comments saying you're not going to get me near my ball, or. Do
you have a go-to word that you'd use to slag off the opposition? Was there one particular word that you used and you were like, that'll get under his skin?
Not really. Not, to be honest. I can't think of anything that I would have used. I think, and it wasn't something I was conscious of. I think when you get into confrontation, you say certain things, but like at the end of the day, that's not something that you kind of say is okay either. But I just think the physical touching of players when they make mistakes is wrong. That's worse than you know, what Simon Zebo did, and I think that's something. So the referees have been given this directive, particularly from the start of the season. Another directive is surrounding the referees after tries are scored. Everybody now is shouting at the referee, check the TMO, or he was offside, or check the pass. The captain is the only one allowed to do that in a kind of an orderly manner. So there's a certain number of directives and things that have been highlighted.
What action will they take in that instance? Is it yellow card job? Or
it should be. It can be a penalty, or it can be a warning to the team if it happens again, you know. But at the end of the day, I think, you know, rugby is in a good place with the discipline and with the processes. Now, there's issues around the TMO. There's safety concerns around power, speed, concussion, all that kind of stuff. So there's plenty of problems, and it's like most sports, it has its issues. But I think the rugby ethos and rugby values are good.
Speaking of rugby values, the best spin-off of this entire story for me was Michael Lowry, who obviously has come in front of the press at some point, and it was late in the week. Lowry says, finger wagging sent my followers through the roof. He's just really enthusiastic about the social media spin-off of this entire thing. My Twitter followers went up massively, so I was over the moon. In terms of that respect, it was quite good. And there are lots of... We sort of tickled him.
Do you remember the one Dylan Armitage did against Brock James in the Heineken Cup final, Toulon, a few years ago? I think that one was nearly... That was worse.
What was that one?
He scored a try because he maybe had a bit of a history of being involved in some incidents in games and stuff like that. So, resulting to Brock James that time. I think Zebo's one was, if you like, but at the same time, it's fine to do. Mario Toja the week before, I think, is worse. When the Glasgow, that's way worse. It's not funny if I'm one of the Glasgow players, though. I'm immediately steam coming out the ears and. You know, and
that's probably what he was trying to do. Was it?
The lead on.
Rile them up a bit.
I don't know. I'd never seen it. I thought it was quite poor of him. The tap for mistakes.
Kevin Donoghue on YouTube. So,
yeah, and this is coming from me, who's saying, look, I didn't know, like none of us, and I had plenty of issues with my discipline. Fabian Palouse kicked me up the arse in 2008 in the final. Did I have to fall on the ground and make a bit of a meal out of it? Probably not to this extent. But my justification was there. He kicked me. So he has done something that he shouldn't have done. He actually literally kicked me in there. Now, maybe the reaction is a bit dramatic. So if I don't kind of grab my backside and kind of fall backwards a bit, is he not going to get penalised for kick? Is it
just
fine?
Slides by.
It's like a soccer player. Should he dive in the or is it a penalty if he stays up?
I think Rivaldo, the 2098 World Cup, 2002 World Cup against Turkey. Pretty much that, like when the ball was kicked at him.
So none of us are perfect on the field, and you know the rugby values thing. Some people kind of say to me, "Oh, geez, these rugby values, this, that, and the other thing." But it's a very topical subject and conversation this week because, like I said, and like I was doing in the breakfast this morning, the GAA president has come out saying he wants to condemn the violence in the GAA. What are they going to do about it? I guarantee, if that's in rugby, that official coming into the last weekend in that game, he's getting a 6-month minimum or 12-month ban away from all GAA games. So it's not impersonal for me against him, but what kind of a message are you sending out?
Exactly what
that someone can interfere and stuff like that. So rugby is good in that way. And I was on the receiving end of punishment sometimes when I felt, you know, it was disappointing or too severe, or maybe and that has happened, players. But rugby's disciplinary stuff has gone from, you know, maybe issues back in the 80s and 90s where you see international matches, even going to France and playing in Paris was, you know, borderline on violence at times, or even club games there in the 90s in the early days in the Heineken Cup were out of control. That the discipline now is really strong. And that's the message you're sending to younger teams, amateur players. And so Zebo's going right back to the start.
Yeah.
I didn't see the bigger picture, the message that it kind of sends out. Nigel Owen saying, apologise. It's not even the apology, it's basically saying, what you did there is wrong. And we don't want that in our game. And we're pretty proud of the way the game is run and the values that the game has. And hear the messages that World Rugby are pushing home to the players, the referees particularly this year. Because that bit of drama, and we've seen a little bit of a creep into rugby, that has to kind of be stamped out.
Does Palouse come up to you afterwards and say, "Oh, sorry, I shouldn't have kicked you up the hoop"?
No, I think at the end of the day, he probably knew that I broke probably one of the most disciplined rugby players ever to play the game, and that was the big slag afterwards, that I broke all my own teammates' heads over the years. Most opposition players referees, and now I was after breaking probably one of the most calm and controlled players of all times. But look, we had a conversation afterwards, and it's water under the bridge.
What was said?
Well, I felt a bit guilty, obviously.
Right.
Anyway.
And so you said to him,
well, he kicked me. I was there, like, you shouldn't have kicked me, but my reaction's a bit more, and he kind of knew that. I think he was probably angry at himself for.
Was he angry at you?
Probably not angry. Yeah, a little bit, but not too bad. That he was happy to talk to me and have a laugh, and he'd have a laugh about it. But that's kind of some of that psychological warfare stuff that. There was a bit of pushing and shoving before that with Byron Kelleher, who was quite an intimidating figure, a very strong player for Toulouse, and he was kind of shouting at Nigel Owens, trying to influence the scrum, and I kind of stood talking to him, and Toulouse got involved. There was a little bit of shoving, and it was kind of stand your ground scenario, and that happens in rugby, and that we like to see that in sport. Like you were saying, the two players going at it a bit. And that's kind of that kind of psychological, where a bit of banter sometimes, the bit of banter has done, it's checking your kind of desire and your will for the fight, if you like. So it's not to just throw names at people or insult people. It's
have a bit of a prod.
It's kind of letting the your opposite guy know that you won't break me today, whatever.
Couple of stories we wanted to talk to you, touch on with you, and I know your parking has run out there 3 minutes ago, so hopefully you don't get clamped.
It's not till 9:35, and we can do it again anyway.
The Ireland squad has named obviously 34 players for the 42 players for the upcoming November run. It'll be cut to 34 obviously for the World Cup if the last World Cup is anything to go by. Rory Scannell not in, Ultan Dillane not in. What's your main sort of takeaway from this squad?
It's a very strong squad. It's no huge surprises. I think Will Addison been in the mix, and I did a piece a few weeks ago on the Indo, 12 months out from the World Cup, saying who are the kind of bolters that can make a push, because when you put down the names for this World Cup squad, 95% of them pick themselves at the moment. Now things will change a little bit with some injuries and stuff like that, so I think he's certainly someone that can kind of propel himself into the mix. Will Addison, he's been very, very good and very talented player who can cover a lot of different positions, and I know Joe Schmidt likes him. I think Sam Arnold getting in is good for him. He'll learn a lot. I think he's improved as a player. Will he start and go to the World Cup? It's probably unlikely, but I think he will grow. He's still a very young player. I'm disappointed for Ultan Dillane because I like him as a player. I think he's
gone backwards a bit, Quinny, has he, over the last?
Yeah, look, he had a tough year last year personally with his mum and stuff passing away, and it's difficult. But I've liked his reaction this year. I think he's a real barnstorming, aggressive, energetic player, and someone who I wouldn't rule out a contention of getting back in the mix again. But there's a lot of depth, there's a lot of power there, and there's a lot of strength. Chris Farrell is obviously someone I think who would be in the mix if he wasn't injured, but there's a lot of quality in that squad, isn't there? There's a lot of depth there now. When you think you can pick 42 players at this stage, and I think it looks like it'll be a B team, a second string team that'll play Italy next week, and probably the team he'll pick, you'll look on paper and you'll say, yeah, they're good enough to go and beat Italy's first side. So I think that's the whole key of probably Italy. Argentina and New Zealand will be full strength, and then USA will be back to a little bit of experimentation and see how guys develop for Joe Schmidt.
You said that the squad kind of picks itself to a certain extent. A lot of positions in the team pick themselves as well, but one of the disagreements I think myself and Joe were having the other day was the second row. Does Ty Burns start in your strongest Ireland 15 at the moment?
No, not at the moment. I think to be fair, he's a phenomenal player, and the versatility thing might be an added benefit to him when it comes to a World Cup squad, but it might be a negative then when he comes to starting in the team, because there's so much quality there. Like it's those back five positions. I think you can't, like Devin Toner and James Ryan have been phenomenal, and I think Toner has kind of found a new lease of life since Henderson's come on board, and James Ryan now, because he probably realises that, you know, one slip up here, one below par performance, and, you know, I'm out of the team. He missed out on a few selections at the World Cup in 2015. Henderson is someone who brings so much to it as well. And they're kind of similar. James Ryan, Tadhg Henderson. They're all abrasive, full of energy, loads of footballing ability, high tackle count, high carry count. They're not kind of one specific strength, if you like. Their all-round games are phenomenal. He's someone that could easily slot in beside James Ryan or Henderson or Toner and have a phenomenal impact. And it was an area a couple of years ago that we were concerned about when Paul O'Connell went, when Donncha O'Callaghan went, when, that depth has been, Donncha Ryan has kind of gone out of the mix as well. So I think he's certainly someone that could start. But on paper, I think, unless things change, the strongest team that you'll pick for New Zealand or for even Argentina is probably the one as close as you can that'll finish to the team that finished over in Twickenham or even finished the third test or started the third test in Australia.
Before we let you go to rescue your car, 15 years to the weekish of your Argentina try?
15 years to the day.
To the day?
26th of October.
Wow.
2003.
Just pre-breaking the shoulder.
You can see both shoulders intact there.
Yeah, and you can see the left one then just starting to make its way out, and then it's...
You didn't even feel it probably at that, or did you at that point? Where you were.
I did. I felt it all right pretty much straight away. But
you were still had the.
Thankfully, I was able to just place the ball.
The shoulder is gone before you grounded the ball.
Yeah.
Right, you kept it.
Just
kept it together.
I think it's just a reaction thing. Yeah. Then, oh Jesus, oh my goodness,
I'm a bit.
What is after?
No, straight away. That's done.
It's a pain unbelievable.
Yeah, it was. It was incredible. It was incredible now, to be honest. And someone said it's like it's kind of it's what women feel when they have a baby. That kind of pain when your shoulder pops out.
Yeah.
And but
that's good dad cast material right there.
I've heard that before, but anyway.
Yeah, fair enough.
I don't know. It's.
How's the shoulder now? Is it like we were talking about your limbs?
I've no lateral rotation. I can only go back to here, so it's still kind of all stitched and.
You just make your peace with it. So have you hardware in there?
No, it's just all kind of stitched up, and it was just made a lot tighter to keep it some bit of stability there. I kind of had to adapt the way I played after that on my left side and stuff. But the arm can fly out, no problem. But it's just that rotation stuff like that is difficult.
Not easy to tap fellas in the head when you're sort of a little bit less.
I'm very surprised at you. My lead commentator with Virgin Media saying that to me.
I'm surprised. I would be surprised that it's never happened.
But that's perception again. How many red cards have I got in my career?
Not enough.
I'm going to say on that basis none.
Look. 0. I knew it was 0.
0, yeah. But you would maybe think that I would have been. But anyway, that's perception. I'm always fighting at my defence. But look,
when you're explaining you're losing, Quinlan.
I know. A lot of the situations I drew on myself. Wrong place, wrong time, all that kind of scenario.
Listen, good chatting as always. Thanks a million. Hope the car isn't clamped. Alan Quinlan there as always with us in OTB AM on a Friday. We've one more piece of business to take care of, and we're going to do that after this short clip. The Leah Varadkar, the Taoiseach, had been speaking at the Viva Stadium as yesterday they announced the return of college football to Dublin from 2020.
I just want to say at the outset how delighted I am that the legendary Navy and Notre Dame game will return to Ireland in 2020. We're honoured and excited that the midshipmen and the Fighting Irish once again will come to Ireland, indeed for the third time. I have to say it is going to be a personal pleasure for me to see this game played again in Dublin because when I was Minister for Transport, Tourism and Sport back in 2012, I was present. In fact, I was on the pitch for one of the for that game, and it came at a time when Ireland was really at the depth of the recession in the midst of a very difficult financial crisis, and that event in 2012 helped to lift the nation and also became the launch pad for the Gathering 2013, which was then held the year after. So I did actually keep a memento from the occasion, believe it or not, which was one of the game balls from that particular match was given to me by the leprechaun, the kind of mascot guy, who apparently is also an athlete, but I've actually kept that ever since. It kind of followed me to the Department of Transport and to the Department of Health, Social Protection, and is now in the Taoiseach's office. So thought I'd bring that along for a bit of show and tell.
Yeah, unlike the Taoiseach's ball I'm pumped. I'm up for this, Dave. I'm sort of ready for college football. Sorry, that just came to me late in the day there. Right, college football come back, and we're looking forward to that 2020 for a 5-year stint. So good times ahead. I said, have one piece of business to do before we leave you. And Eoin is going to pick his PwC All-Star Team of the Year. I'm sure there's going to be a few controversies about this one. PwC have just launched a new app where you can go on and check out make your own selections. There's quizzes and all that sort of good stuff up there as well. But yeah, it allows you to go on and pick your All-Star 15. We were celebrating it at PwC's offices last night in the company of some GAA legends. But Owen's going to test it first now.
Yeah, let's pick my goalkeeper here. Who have I gone for?
Stephen Cluxton, obviously.
Rory Beggan. Rory Beggan for me, goalkeeper of the year. Not to say that Stephen Cluxton had a bad year or anything. I'm not too sure Cluxton is going to win it, to be quite honest with you. I know it's all personal preference here. It's the one sticking point here, the goalkeeper, really. I think the rest of the team...
Dave, have you any thoughts on who'll win the goalkeeper?
I'm trying to find my selection.
We'll get Dave's selection after I go through it.
Have you gone for Cluxton in goal or not?
I think I have, yeah.
Drew Wiley at corner back. Let's go through the rest of the full back line. At full back, I've gone for Padraig Hampsey, and then in the other corner, I've gone for Johnny Cooper. So I don't think there's going to be too many disputes about that. The half back line, I think, is absolutely stone set in. Jack McCaffrey, centre back James McCarthy, and wing back is Carl O'Connell. I think McCaffrey and O'Connell absolutely 100%. McCarthy, kind of looking at the other options, I think he happened to be Brian Fenton, obviously in midfield, no question about that. And I picked Colin Kavanagh to go alongside him. And the half forwards then, I've gone for Brian Howard, banker, centre forward Kieran Kilkenny, banker, and at wing forward I've gone for Shane Walsh, who in my opinion deserves to be in that squad.
I mean, there's one standout surprise for me so far in this 12 players that have been picked, that there isn't one Kerry jersey on it.
Well, you clearly haven't watched any football this year. In corner forward we've gone for Paul Mannion. At full forward we've gone for Conor McManus, and at the other corner we've gone for David Clifford.
Well, I knew they'd come at some point. I mean, it's fair. No, it's fair. You don't need to justify yourself.
You say that as if that's like some sort of shock.
No, it's fair. I just said it's fair.
Dave will agree with me that team is probably going to be...
Is that the team of the year?
I would say I'll have 13.
There are 4 changes from my team.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I would have expected only 2. So you don't have James McCarthy, you don't have Rory Beggan, you don't have Drew Wiley, and you don't have Shane Walsh?
No.
You don't have Colin Kavanagh?
You've only got one of those right.
So you haven't gone for Johnny Cooper?
No, I'm not going to go through them all because we haven't even sat down to.
Well, I was just going to ask. This is the annual bait, Dave, about being on the All-Stars.
Well, I'll just tell you. I think just going through quickly, you had 11 of my 15. I had a different Galway man in than your Galway man. But it's next Wednesday.
Right.
So
you go in.
I'm actually on the show again before the meeting next Wednesday.
Fantastic.
So another opportunity for yourself and Jared to bait me next Wednesday.
Do you go in and sort of sit down for half an hour, kind of knock heads, have really great conversation for half an hour, and then go on the piss? Is that the?
There is an event that night, but unfortunately it's Halloween.
No, they don't.
I have to be out.
Trick-or-treating.
Pacing the streets, trick-or-treating on Wednesday evening. So
what they do is they go on the piss while they're selecting the team.
well, the hurling meeting is 11:30, so those boys will do well to be locked before the meeting starts. Then there's some grub, and then the football selection committee meet at about 12:30.
On the basis that we have more opportunities to bait you, Dave, we'll ease off on you this morning.
It's a good team, though. I like it.
Thanks, Dave. Other thing we wanted to mention before we wrapped up, there's a fundraiser in Meath tonight for Sean Cox. I think we can bring you up a quick image from the Eventbrite page in just 2 seconds here, just to give you details. I don't want to get them wrong. At the 30th anniversary of Meath's All-Ireland final tonight in the Knightsbrook Hotel Health Spa and Golf from 7 o'clock to 9 o'clock. Tickets are only €10. Hop onto Eventbrite there. It's with thanks to or LMFM are running the event, but as I say, all proceeds going to the family of Sean Cox, so worthy cause.
Absolutely. That's pretty much it from, I was going to say an extended show, but I mean that's just pretty much the run of things on a Friday. Thanks a million for tuning in. Fabian Palouse kicked me up the hole was my highlight of this morning, I have to say.
Yeah, probably mine as well, to be honest.
It was a beauty. Thanks, Dave, for coming in.
Thank you.
Oh, thanks a million. Plenty more from the Off the Ball channels over the course of the day. Keep an eye out from us for the morning. Good morning, good luck.
OTB AM.
Thanks to Screwfix.ie, championing the trade with a dedicated call centre.